Let's go ahead and come to order. Catherine, would you please take roll?
Cobb. Here. Voorhees.
Here.
Leahy.
Here.
Gamba.
Here.
Davis.
Here.
Godus. Ingraham.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this point, we will go through. There are no agenda changes to report, so at this point, I will go through and ask every council member to identify whether or not they have any conflicts of interest. Jim, would you like to start?
Certainly. I have no conflicts of interest.
Steve?
I have no conflicts of interest.
I also have no conflicts of interest.
None.
I have no conflicts of interest with anything on tonight's agenda.
The same here. I have no conflicts of interest on anything on the agenda this evening.
All right. At this point, I would invite anyone from this, any citizens who would like to address us on any item that is not on this evening's agenda. If you want to speak to us, I would ask you to limit your comments to 3 minutes and come up to the podium, give us your name and address. So anyone who would like to address us, all right.
Hi, everybody. I'm actually here to do, my name is Molly Peterson. I'm from Glenwood. I'm at 3413 South Grand Avenue. And I'm actually here to address the ATR, the accessory tourist rental, and that it be taken off of the moratorium. So I'm a permanent resident of Glenwood. I've been here in this valley for 10 years now. I actually recently just purchased my own home last June, 2017. I'm also a teacher here, and so I'm trying also to make it here in this valley and stay in this community. I love it here. But because I'm a teacher, money has always been kind of an issue for me. I've learned to supplement my income. I teach after-school programs, I tutor, and I actually also teach summer school as well. I've been kind of working on these things just to maintain my life here. Like I said, we're a close community here in Glenwood. Everybody supports each other, and I don't want to have to leave. I've hosted ATRs in the past and had zero problems. I was actually just recently fixing up my spare bedroom to become an ATR so I could earn some additional income, and that's when the moratorium went into place. Accessory tourist rentals are different than short-term rentals in this valley. They are hosted visits. They don't take a house off of the rental market, and my house is still my home. I understand the issues that short-term rentals have had here in the valley, traffic, congestion on the streets, just general disturbances, but there's been no disturbances when in accessory tourist rentals. They're just totally different than short-term rentals, and I would appreciate you taking it off of the moratorium. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the council for any item not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, I will close it to citizens appearing before council, and we have a proclamation. This proclamation is the Veterans Suicide about the Veterans Suicide Awareness Month, December of 2018. Whereas, according to the most recent U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs study, approximately 20 veterans die by suicide every day in the United States. And whereas veterans face a disproportionate risk of suicide when compared to the general population, and whereas the highest risk for suicide is among younger veterans, especially those who served on the battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan. And whereas the risk of suicide can be reduced through awareness, proper education, resources, and treatment. And whereas suicide affects each and every one of us in some way, and it is up to us to help those we love by being good neighbors, good friends, and good family members if we are to protect our veterans from such a tragic fate. Now, therefore, I, Michael Gamba, Mayor of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, do hereby proclaim December 2018 to be Veteran Suicide Awareness Month. In the City of Glenwood Springs, I encourage all citizens, municipal government, elected officials, and employees to recognize how serious suicide is and the steps each of us can take to protect those around us for such tragedy. And I don't believe we have anyone to receive the proclamation tonight, but this will be forwarded to a veterans group, is my understanding. All right.
If I may, Mike, I just had the comment that the proclamation referred to our military service members who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, but that issue is also a very significant issue for those who served in Vietnam.
All right, at this point, I'm going to go into council comments, and before I open it up to the rest of council, I'm going to take this opportunity to honor several gentlemen in town who have passed recently. Over the past few weeks, Glenwood Springs has lost 3 pillars of our community: Lyle Beatty, Jack Nelson, and General George Weir. 3 extraordinary individuals who helped shape this town and make it what it is today. Councilman Ingraham and I wish to honor their memories and contributions tonight. I'll be speaking about Mr. Beatty and Mr. Nelson, whom I knew personally, as I'm sure many here have, and Jim will pay tribute to General Weir. Lyle and Jack had a lot in common. They both served their country in the Navy in World War II. Lyle was deployed to the South Pacific, Jack to the European theater. They both shared an entrepreneurial spirit. Lyle became an engineer and developer. Jack went to work for Ford Motor Company. Both relocated to Glenwood Springs for the opportunities our town offered in business and in raising a family. Lyle, Jack, we have been graced by the choices you made as young men. Both men believed in giving back and being of service to the community of Glenwood Springs. Lyle served 3 terms on the Glenwood Springs City Council, including 2 terms as mayor. Jack served on the Glenwood Springs Chamber Resort Association's Board of Directors, including 6 years as chairman. In 1997, he was honored as Citizen of the Year. Both understood the value of community involvement and were active volunteers. Lyle's last job was as an ambassador at Glenwood Caverns Adventure Park, greeting and giving guidance to arriving guests at the top of the tram. Even into retirement, Jack, Lyle, you made our community better by sharing your time, knowledge, and generous spirits. Equally important as their many achievements, both Lyle and Jack were known as men of strong moral character, good men. That may seem like an old-fashioned notion today, but in business and in day-to-day interactions, both of them displayed integrity, honesty, hospitality, support, and encouragement, professionally and personally. Thank you, Lyle and Jack, for showing us what a life well lived looks like. This tribute just scratches the surface of who Lyle and Jack were and what they meant to Glenwood Springs. On behalf of the City of Glenwood Springs, I want to express our heartfelt condolences to the Beatty and Nilsson families.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Jim, if you'd like to make some comments.
Certainly. Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about General George Weir. Born and raised in this area around Meeker, and in the late 1930s hopped on a train headed for West Point in New York. Long trip across the country to enroll in the U.S. Military Academy, and by his own account, it was a rough start. He would have said and has said that he didn't have the same education advantage that some of his classmates did, but he knew how to handle horses, and they still had a cavalry back then. So and he also knew how to work hard, so he made it through and graduated in 1944. Got his commission as an officer in the Army and headed over to Europe just in time to be engaged in the Battle of the Bulge. And then he made a career of the Army. He fought in Korea, he fought in Vietnam, and while in Vietnam reached the flag rank as a general. He earned a bunch of medals that we've heard the names of in movies and read in books, but the ones he was proudest of was his combat infantry badge. He earned one in each of those wars. He retired in Glenwood. He was active in serving the community. He was a member of the Rotary. He was a member of the 100 Club. And I heard time and again from those who knew him that George Ware was the most interesting man I ever met. And also I would heard he encouraged me and inspired me. I also heard he was a heck of a storyteller. That's George Ware. And to sort of sum up, I'll say, you know, listening to what you said, Mike, about Jack and Lyle, thinking about George, and thinking about George H.W. Bush, and the characteristics that they shared. You know, they served their country. They served their communities. They're brave, hardworking, but they were humble, men of integrity. And they were positive people, not divisive. And they'll all be missed. And we would all do well, in my view, to try to be more like them. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
In honor of those three men and former President George H.W. Bush, I wouldn't mind if we took a few moments of silence, if everybody would be okay with that. All right, thank you. At this point, are there any other council comments that anyone else would like to make? I'll at the end of the council comments, I'll announce our recent good news, if that's okay.
Recent good news. I just would like to say, since we will not be having another council meeting before the holiday, happy holiday to my fellow councilors and all of staff and the whole community. I feel so blessed to live in such a beautiful place, and I just hope everyone is grateful for that and has a wonderful holiday season. So, thank you.
Thanks, Shelley.
No one else is going to speak. I'll speak real quickly. So on the VRBO issues, and I always like to try and give somebody some kind of a comment back if they've taken the time to come down here and spend their time on an issue. You know, I think we're now down to 3 months and maybe a week of this moratorium. So I apologize that you're collateral damage of this. I mean, I think there's other people out there that had plans that are not sure what to do with their plans at this point. One thing that I will say is, you know, when I first moved to town, I bought my first duplex so I could live in the front unit and rent the back unit in a town that was too expensive for me to live in. That was 25 years ago. I still have a house where I live in the front unit, and I have a little carriage house in the back unit. And I built that to make this town more affordable so that I could afford to put my kids through college now and still stay here. So, you know, we have between 4,300 and 4,500 rental units or units in this town of housing units. And for every one of those 4,500 units, there's another story of what people are doing to afford to live in this town. And it continues to get more and more difficult as prices get higher. So I hope council takes into consideration folks like yourself and myself, that we all do what we have to do to live in this town. And every bit of rental income, whether it's short-term, long-term, medium-term, or whatever it is you need to do with your life and your property, that rental income helps us live in this town. So I feel for you folks like that. I've been doing it for 24 years, and it's still a difficult town to live in with the price of real estate and the price of everything up here. So give us a little time. Hopefully we can get this right and give everyone some certainty as to where this industry is going.
Thanks, Todd. Anyone else have any comments? I have one more comment to make. This one is in the good news category. This morning, while the council was sitting in our morning work session, we received an email from Senator Gardner's office indicating that the city of Glenwood Springs was awarded a Build America grant in the amount of $7 million for South Midland. And That's a really big deal. Last year, this same grant program, no one in the state of Colorado was issued a grant. I don't know if anyone else in Colorado was issued one in this cycle or not, but
I think CDOT got 2. So CDOT got 2 and
we got one. So that's a great thing for the city of Glenwood Springs, and not to belittle this one, but we also learned this afternoon we received a $155,000 grant from the Energy Impact Assistance Fund, DOLA, via DOLA, to fund rockfall mitigation on the South Midland project. So all in all, it's been a pretty good day for the city of Glenwood Springs in the grant world. So I believe that the city will be or has issued a press release in that regard. Okay.
You got to toot your horn a little better than that. So Mike and Deborah and Carl all went to DC for this grant, this Make America Great grant. Is that what it's called?
Build America.
Build America. Make America Great. There you go. Where's my damn hat? Sorry if anybody that's offensive. So anyway, these guys went out there and did the whole dog and pony show, took time out of their lives to go to DC and present Glenwood Springs and this project to them. And like Mike said, last year, there was 0 made it to the state of Colorado. That's how hard this grant is to get. And for us little old Glenwood Springs to pull this thing off and get $7 million, huge kudos to our mayor, to Carl, to Deborah. Deborah actually in her last town in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, was part of bringing one of those grants to her town there. So 2 for 2. And that's just absolutely huge for $7 million. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, I thought that was nothing short of a miracle as we heard that news today, and certainly as you guys were making plans to take time to go to Washington, D.C. to chase that grant, I just thought, oh, man. Just setting yourself up for...
There's a movie called Miracle on, I think, 34th Street. This is the Miracle on 8th.
Well, that is not a small sum of money to pull out of Washington, D.C. and have it come to a little small mountain town in Colorado. So, good job.
All right. So moving on, next item is the consent agenda. On this evening's consent agenda are the following items: receipt of minutes from the November 15, 2018 regular meeting, Resolution 2018-59, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, adopting the Colorado Municipal Election Code of 1965 and delegating the authority and responsibility of appointing election judges for the City of Glenwood Springs regular municipal election on April 2nd, 2019. To certify the election results of the November 6, 2018 election. Approval of a proposal for bidding and construction of phase services for Two Rivers Park Improvement Project. Approval of Two Rivers engineering contract. Ordinance number 26, series of 2018, and ordinance of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, fixing and certifying the mill levy on the 2018 assessment for collection in fiscal year 2019 for the Glenwood Springs General Improvement District number 1980. Ordinance number 27, series of 2018, and ordinance of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, fixing and certifying the mill levy on the 2018 assessment for collection in fiscal year 2019. Ordinance number 28, series of 2018, and ordinance of the City Council of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, vacating portions of First and Maple Streets rights of way. Resolution 2018-16, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, canceling the second regular City Council meeting in December 2018. Resolution 2018-63, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, accepting the portion of 6th Street from Pine Street to Laurel Street that has been abandoned by the Department of Transportation. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Todd and a second by Rick to approve the consent agenda. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, next item is a presentation of our economic development plan.
Are we not hooked up?
Good evening, Mayor, members of council.
Hang on just one second. Are we not part of the voting? Where do you join the meeting? I know I've gone there.
Yeah.
Go and click back.
See right here.
And then click this one because you're leaving the November 15th.
Click this one?
Yeah.
Oh.
To unjoin the last
And
one.
then click the, okay.
Sorry, we
I
recently got a
Sorry.
new software package that presents our agenda to us on our screens, and we're slow. So it's going to take us a while to figure it out.
We're good. I think we're good.
We're getting better, though.
4 months,
We good?
12 days.
Okay.
And
So we're good.
okay.
Excellent. I'd like to introduce Jesse Silverstein of Development Research Partners, who over the past 7 months has been working on a strategy for our economic development, and that was created through market data research, a SWOT analysis, interviews with staff, and it's key to the economic development focus areas that you identified earlier this year. The economic development strategy makes recommendations about measures the city can do in partnership with others in the community and the region to diversify our economy and also grow industries that we already have. So with that, I will turn that over to Jesse. Great.
Thanks, Jen.
Great. Here.
Well, thank you all for having me here. If I could figure out the technology and talk at the same time. And I really appreciate having the opportunity to work in Glenwood Springs for as long as I have. Where'd it go? Okay, really quickly. It's the first. It's on the files. Keep going down. Files.
You can try.
All right. And just to remind you all, I've been involved with the city for several years here. I was part of the team that came in and did the area-wide plan. I guess still in progress. My portion of it is done, I believe. Well, we can talk about that later. But it's been just a great community, great to learn about what you've been doing and kind of me as an economist diving in and really getting to understand what's going on here. And so a lot of the work that I've done in economic development is based on some of the work that came out of that area-wide plan, the economic and market analysis that I did for that. What I'm presenting on, obviously, is an economic development strategy, working on your focus areas. And so the purpose of this, of my study, was to inform strategies and approaches for each of your economic development focus areas, which you all know what they are: regional trade, regional services, tourism, downtown development, community development enhancement, and the one that kind of threw me off a little bit, job growth and creation. And when I say it threw me off a little bit, it's because job growth and creation is the umbrella for all the other 5 focus areas you had. So thinking about how to look at your economic development opportunities against the framework that you gave me was a good challenge, and it was very good. I think it gave me some good direction on it all. And so what we did was we wanted a data-driven analysis, right? We need to understand what businesses were doing here, how your economy compares in terms of business mixes compares to the state, the country. What are you missing here? What could you be? What are some maybe creative ways to meet some of your challenges? And how that might fit into various locations as well. So what I first started off with was an assessment of your town as a whole. And there are several ways to do this. SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Given the particular challenges that you had given me and the questions that you were asking me, I decided it'd be best to go towards economic development selection, site selection criteria. And there's various assessments that are done to look at how businesses decide to stay in a place, grow in a place, expand in a place, or move to a place. And I want to know all about what was going on in this place so I can understand what our opportunities were. So I looked at this, and I assume it's all in front of you too, is that correct? So I looked at this list, a specific list of assessment criteria, and evaluated that to arrive as a background for what then I can apply the data to. Very quickly, this is looking at your employment data. We went into what's called QECW data, which is state unemployment data, which tracks every business that pays unemployment. We are able to refine, it's something that we've kind of perfected in our office, refine that down just to Glenwood Springs. We also looked at data from D&B and Hoover's database, which is a business database which covers all businesses, including those that don't have employees, whether they're single entity LLC or they're sole proprietors, small business that hasn't been registered yet, and combined all those together to get a distribution which, not surprisingly, a lot of leisure and hospitality, section of government, education and health services, retail trade are your biggest sectors. Something to keep in mind, professional and business services was something that was a little bit smaller. I think as you'll see as we go through this, it's one of those areas that I think is a huge opportunity for you all. We took all this data and applied an economic technique called cluster analysis, and that is looking at the kinds of businesses that tend to work well together, whether that's through a horizontal kind of relationship where there are competitors or maybe complementary businesses, food and beer, entertainment and beer, that kind of guy. And as well as looking at some vertical integrations. What are some businesses and supply chains, and how do those relate, and how are we fitting the needs, and what are the holes that we need to do? And we use that to understand where we can grow and retain businesses and industries, what are unique opportunities in emerging industries, what companies are there to grow with their supply chains, and how to, maybe more importantly, especially what I feel for Glenwood Springs is how to explain your regional economic image. What is your economic brand? How do you talk to businesses that are interested in moving here, or entrepreneurs that might live here that want to start something? How do you present that economic brand? As we started looking at the cluster analysis, we started looking at distributions of industries, and these are very high-level industries. So there's a lot of different businesses under this. Each of these categories has hundreds of types of businesses. But just looking in a broad sense, how does Glenwood Springs compare to Colorado? Glenwood Springs is the green lines. Colorado are the blue lines. And the U.S. are the yellow or gold lines. I guess they're more orange. And what it is the total distribution of industries that comprise the entire economy. Your city, the state, and above. And what kind of really stands out to me are the things that you have a higher concentration of industries than the state or the country. Leisure and hospitality, not surprising. Education and health services, not surprising. Big sectors, retail trade, construction. And then there are other things that kind of go together that that we can build together. So there are other areas where you have less distribution to those kinds of industries. And of course some of this is geographic in nature, hills, mountains, environmental situations. But you start to understand how things are distributed. We look at professional business services. I'm going to keep coming back to that. Colorado. We have a lot of those kinds of services in Colorado, professional business services. And those are a lot of vendors, businesses that support the success of other businesses. but we're kind of below the average on that. And so this kind of gives us some goals. It identifies both things that we have a comparative advantage in and are doing well in, and other things where maybe there are some opportunities to grow. This is a very busy looking chart, and so I somewhat summarized it with the big print on the bottom. But this is looking at actual concentrations of these industries across those geographic regions. And what we did, we can get into a lot of detail. We did not have the time to get into that, the resources. We're kind of more of a higher level strategy here. But we looked at the 3 biggest existing industries, the ones that we're assuming you have comparative advantages for. Comparative advantages being that just naturally, for whatever the circumstances, those kinds of businesses do well here. And we looked at the 3 things that seems to be in shortage here, that would be opportunities. And this is all given the framework of that economic development assessment that we went through. So we kind of compared the 2. There is an art to economics, and so what we looked at is your very strong existing industries: outdoor recreation, hospitality, healthcare, construction and building services. And those are all, if you think about it, all industries that serve a broader market, and a lot of them are the regional market. Opportunities we see are those business support services. Big, huge opportunity in that. Technology and information. Gosh, we're so technology driven in our society today. And you guys have pretty darn good broadband. Sounds like you're heading towards redundancy on that. You should have plenty of bandwidth to support a lot of technology information businesses. And regional transportation. So when I look at things like business support services, regional transportation, construction and building services, it really brings to my mind the notion that you guys really are a natural service center for the region. I'm not talking the region out to Vail and out to Grand Junction, but the region maybe between Rifle and down to Aspen, maybe up towards Eagle. And it's okay that we have competitive businesses with those communities. That's good. It's healthy competition. What was also interesting as we started looking at entrepreneurial markets was, on the left is Glenwood Springs business sizes. And again, this comes from QCW and D&B data. Actual employees working here. Almost about a little over 85% of your businesses here employ less than 10 employees. They're all small businesses. What I did on the right side as a comparison was I went to U.S. Census data. It's longitudinal data, and what they do is they track people from the ages, from people that were born in 1955 through about 1960, and they survey these people every year for their entire life. And they took that data set of all these people. It's really kind of fascinating data. And they said, okay, how many of you have started your own businesses over your lifetime? When you've started those businesses, what's the largest size that it had grown to? And if you look at the chart on the right, I didn't do percentages, but you can see just eyeballing it, almost 600 businesses, the largest category, have less than 9 employees. I mean, you almost have a natural tendency towards entrepreneurialism, which I think you're not surprised about. And so I kind of pegged you as a natural land of entrepreneurs. And what's really interesting when we look at the data a little bit deeper, I know for a while, it may still be there, but during all this technological upheaval since 2000, basically, 1990s and 2000, you know, we tend to think about entrepreneurs as being everybody out there writing code and apps and everybody web-based, and it's all young people that are choosing to be entrepreneurs versus do other things. But when you really look at the data, so this chart, it's got a lot of colors and it's big, but it's really simple. This is the percentage, it's years, each vertical bar is a year up through 2013, from 1996. On the left axis is the percent of entrepreneurs. This is data through the Kaufman Foundation, which tracks this kind of information on entrepreneurs and startups. And then we have it distributed by age. So the green, for any one of those years, the green extent speaks to those under 25 years. The gray bars talk to entrepreneurs 25 to 34 years of age, right? What you usually think of as young entrepreneurs. But when you also think about people, myself included, who gained experience, gained work experience, brought some knowledge and some of their own views to an issue, to a challenge, to a product, you really find a lot of people in the blue and the purple, 35 to 55-year-olds that are leaving their business or laid off and they go start their own businesses. And that's a huge chunk of what happens. And where I find this interesting is when you look at the demographics of Glenwood Springs, your demographics pretty much follow this pattern. You definitely have a pattern of people either being born here or moving here and staying here the rest of their lives. We all understand it's not for everybody, but the people who are here, they're here. And so when you think about this as a life cycle, we have years of opportunity ahead of us in the entrepreneurial markets. And when we start looking at in-migration by age, the gray bars is our projected, the horizontal bars are projected in-migration in numbers. The gray bars are 2010 through 2020, and then the age brackets are on the left side there. When you look at those years of entrepreneurial investment in themselves, people investing in themselves and their own businesses, we have the same exact match of people continuing to move in here. So where, I'm kind of skipping along here and going very high level, but not all entrepreneurs need a place to work, but many do. Whether it's because you're tired of your working out of your house, whether because you can't work in your house because you're renting it out for extra income, or it's for your own family, you need a place to work. And so co-working space comes up. And we took a pretty deep dive into what it means to have working space. What is it? Who does it meet? And it can range, this is a sample, a very high level, 4 different types, from very simple, office space and a phone and maybe a place for a conference, to maker space, a place where you can share equipment, large equipment, small equipment, to a food lab or kitchen space, or hacker space or STEM labs, where you have very high-tech equipment, lab equipment, that are being shared by a number of people, by a variety of different professions and technologists, which obviously is going to be one of my recommendations, that we focus on this entrepreneurial segment. There's a couple of challenges that came up that created a puzzle for me. And that little picture in the middle is a puzzle piece waiting to grow. And some of the puzzle pieces were, you know, if you look at some of your sites, particularly in the south side of town, where some of your industrial zoning is, the lots are kind of odd size, shallow and narrow. You have some smaller places to fit things. So what kinds of businesses might be able to fit in there? When we start looking at advanced manufacturing, the 2 pictures on the upper left are both circuit board machines. And I got a picture with somebody in there so you can see the scale of that. Now, depending upon the kind of operation you have, you may need multiples of these, but the square footage and the dimensions and the floor space that they take up make them very flexible as to where you can put them and the kinds of businesses you can develop around them. Just one idea. Entrepreneurial market, I talked about as a big target. Food and leisure and hospitality, that bottom picture there is actually an indoor greenhouse, and I believe that is from Cincinnati, if I recall. It's from a city you wouldn't expect it. when we were working on the area-wide plan, one of the things that became clear was, gosh, it would be great to have more restaurants, more foodie kinds of things to do. Not that there aren't great restaurants here, but friendly competition, providing diversity of product that people can enjoy. Nothing more foodie than locally grown spices, herbs, lettuces that can supply local restaurants, can supply local retail, you can sell at retail, depending upon the spaces, and they can fit into, particularly these vertical types can fit into very small spaces as well. That machine on the right there, on the lower right, that's actually a plastic injection machine. And I don't have a person standing next to it for scale, but it's about 15 feet long and about 6 feet wide. And a lot of products that are becoming high-tech products can be 3D printed or injection molded with very small machines. And so those are both manufacturing opportunities that are high-tech, fairly clean products that can be distributed easily through the airports or through local service. And then up on the right, you know, one of the challenges that I saw here was the cost of construction, affordability. I mean, affordability is an issue in many places right now, but particularly you seem to have a persistent affordability issue. The notion of modular housing, and when I talk about modular housing, I'm talking about light manufacturing or semi-light manufacturing that makes components for custom-made homes and businesses. And I'm not talking about manufactured homes, which arrive at a site and you put the two halves together with Elmer's glue and you have a house. I'm not talking about prefab houses. I'm talking about components that are built off-site and assembled on-site. 50 years ago, you're building a house, you had the carpenter out there hammering away and putting together doorways and window frames and doing it all by hand and roof trusses. Now they all get made somewhere off-site and get assembled on site. It's much quicker, much more cost-effective. And this approach has been scaled up where you can design whole rooms that can be pre-assembled on site. It's actually a big product in Europe. It's starting to be a big product on the East Coast, on the West Coast especially. Starting to make its way into the East Coast because it's very affordable and it's fast to put up and it's good quality. And I start thinking of some of your bigger spaces you might have for these kinds of things. Not sure what's going on with, say, the airport or other areas where you might have some room for some light manufacturing clusters. But when I think of serving the region, you have a cluster, a strong cluster of construction businesses. You have a strong cluster of trucking companies. And so when I start putting those things together, gosh, wouldn't it be great to manufacture homes here? We bring in some manufacturing, especially skills, high-wage skills, and we are able to supply the rest of the region with a more affordable housing or commercial buildings. And so those two buildings are just an example of some of that. So I'm trying to, this list can be endless, and I was trying to kind of dig in and give you some examples that I hope maybe find some root. You know, in terms of geographic opportunities, short list of places that this economic activity can happen. Economic activity is really location neutral, sort of. If you got the right site, then it can work, and the right zoning, it can work. We could have co-working space or even light manufacturing space, perhaps, over in the Confluence area. I could see co-working and small office space being a great place to combine residents, businesses, and of course those businesses then grow into second-tier businesses as they expand and need their own space. Downtown, South Glenwood, anyway, there's a number of places to go. And when I started overlaying your focus areas with the opportunities that I was seeing on the economic development side, I said, heck, I'm just going to throw a chart together. So across the top of that lower chart is your focus areas, and then down the side, are the opportunity industries and down the left side is your areas of focus. And when we start thinking about Glenwood growing itself into the regional hub here, which it already is, but more so even as the service provider of the area, regional services cuts across all those opportunity industries. Regional trade cuts through a lot of those, as well as downtown development, community development. All these industries touch somewhere. Again, kind of a list of what this brings us in terms of more specific industries: co-working makerspace and move-up space, construction industry growth, recreation industry. Oh, and don't forget, I don't have on here, but tourism growth too. Of course, this all feeds into a stronger, better, well-known location, well-branded location. And retaining and expanding existing local businesses, supporting entrepreneurs, and expanding the light industrial base, which would give you a very diverse economy. Maybe break out some of the energy wells too. So I have been taking a more strategic approach with this. I'm making some suggestions and recommendations as to where to start. I have not put together an action plan. That was not part of my scope of work, but putting together some opportunities and goals. And I would recommend starting to develop an economic brand supplemental to your hospitality and outdoor recreation brand, hospitality and leisure sectors. Cater to new businesses just like you would cater to tourists. Be inviting, host them in, go out and meet them, greet them. Be the center of regional market for construction, business services, local trucking and tech support. One of the things I think that you can do is you have an amazing number of business associations, trade associations here in town that you may not know about, but I think that there's a lot of knowledge to tap into. Businesses and associations that know their own opportunities that they would like to pursue. And I think pulling those kinds of focus groups together would be great discussions to have, and bring them all together to see where there's some cross-pollination of industries. I believe will uncover a lot of opportunities for you as well. You know, a lot of people talk about apprenticeship programs and entrepreneurship. There is an official federal apprenticeship program that the state of Colorado is part of that program, and it is a formal program that defines a work experience and paid work kind of share time to train people. There's a lot of people that offer internships and apprenticeships, but when you look on the state of Colorado website for those companies that are offering official apprenticeships, formal apprenticeships with credit, there are just a handful. There's very few. I think there's such opportunities with your trade associations and your businesses and your educational institutions to form an official apprenticeship program and be labeled as that, be known for that, attract the best workers. Recommendations. My recommendations, have a dedicated economic development function that can focus on reaching out and inviting in new businesses, can focus on talking to existing businesses, help them expand, be that liaison between the government and your local economy. One thing I know that is missing here is an available properties database. Trying to find market information on what rental rates are, or what properties are available. You're hunting and pecking around to different realtor sites, and it's such a boon to have that kind of information handy. And there are a lot of models out there to do that. That would be great. And further establish economic gardening. Economic gardening is programs to help small businesses expand and start. Support attainable housing development, as I know you all do. Make sure we're supporting it for the region. Because what's better than having an economically strong city, but is having an economically strong region that likes to spend their money in your place and utilize your businesses. We know a lot about placemaking as far as planning. I think there's also a place for economic placemaking, and that fits in well with identifying your assets, putting a good foot forward, branding, doing a good marketing campaign, and continue to incentivize and invest in the community's long-range vision. And there's several categories. I provided a list in the full report of various kinds of incentives. Some you have, some you can get, some are available to you that you may not know about. But I tried to organize them into specific purposes of those incentives, to catalyze economic place, to enhance economic stability and growth, to boost regional trade, invest in people skills. And I use the word incentivize here, and I think I mentioned this before when I've been in front of you all. I don't like the term incentives. I like public investment, because that's what we're doing, is investing in ourselves, and with a long-term vision. And with that, I probably took way too much time, but I really thank you for letting me give you my thoughts and for inviting me up here.
Thank you, Jesse.
Great.
Any questions for Jesse at this point?
I don't have any questions, but I have a whole bunch of thoughts, and we can probably have a. I'm sure we'll talk more about this.
Yeah, and I'm going to open it up to public comment if no one has any questions for Jesse, and then we'll bring it back to council for discussion. And I think we're looking to vote on adopting this economic development plan as the end result tonight. So,
my only question is, can we get a copy of the slide set? Because it is a little different approach than what's in the actual report. So I'd love to have the slide set too, if that's okay.
Yes, and I apologize for being late with my slide deck. I should have gotten to you days ago.
Yeah, it's a lot of information to digest, but very well put together. And
you've worked with me enough times now to know that I get detailed.
All right, thanks, Jesse.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Is there anyone in the public who would like to comment on the proposed economic development plan? All right, seeing, Mr. Blair, please come up to the podium in just 1 second. There we go.
Get 1 second?
Yeah, you only get 1 second. You're done, thanks.
I know you didn't.
Well, thank you. I am Michael Blair, Sprucewood Lane in Glenwood Springs. I found this presentation very interesting and encouraging that the city is following through to consider an economic development plan, and that can mean many, many things in my experience of over 50 some odd years in this type of business. The biggest problem with this is there's not enough follow-through. And follow-through can take money, which you folks seem to complain that you don't have enough of. But it seems like a good start, and I would just encourage you to find a way to follow through with some of the elements of it. And I think the first thing you should follow through with is to develop housing that's available for all these employees that you want to encourage to come here with the new businesses and the new economy. Housing for employees is really critical. It's overly critical now, but you can make it worse if it doesn't follow along with the economic growth. But I think it's an interesting idea, and it's been pretty well done in my opinion. So find a way to follow through with it if you're going to utilize the money you've already spent. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to comment? All right, seeing none, I will close it to public comment and bring it back to council for discussion and or motion. One comment I would just like to make before we get going here is I've been on council now 7 months, or 7 years, 8 months, and a few days, and about 7 years, 8 months, and no days ago, I asked our then city manager what we were doing about economic development, and I was actually laughed at. And you see, we have a different city manager now, and and this is something that was I felt very important to the city, and I appreciate your efforts on this, Jesse. I agree, Mike, that follow through is critical. We discussed a little bit in our pre-meeting this morning that there will be some follow-up work sessions on council to discuss an action plan as to how to begin implementing this. If this report sits on a shelf, it was a waste of time, but if we actually move forward with implementing elements of it as we are able, then I think it could be a huge benefit for the city. So that I'll open up to other council members. Rick?
I think you did a great job, Jesse, in putting this data together. It's kind of compelling to me to see the in-migration of people 25 to 45, basically kind of aligning with, the likelihood of being entrepreneurs. And I'd just like to say that a lot of people get into being entrepreneurs because the regular sources of income that they would normally draw from a community aren't enough to live here. And so, it's more or less a labor of love, probably coupled with economic necessity. And I think that, there's some things that the city could do, and I think I'm looking forward to some of those discussions. I wouldn't necessarily call this a plan at this point. In fact, it's not even labeled a plan, it's labeled a strategy. And so the very hard work comes about then in trying to identify, with some precision, who's going to do what, and when they're going to do it, and as Mike said, basically what is this going to cost to do. I think as we move forward, I think very much there's a number of investments that could be made, need to be made. And one thing every entrepreneur needs is high-speed internet. I'm really pleased to see that the city has a strategy for that. And in the land of grants, I understand that it's been a good day, Glenwood Springs, that we have participated in a consortium called Thor. And that's going to bring 100 gig line into Glenwood. And so all of this stuff can't happen all at once, but it's definitely a foundational sort of thing, especially for entrepreneurs who are not place-bound and who may not be part of the retail sector. So the other observation I make is if you look at economic development plans throughout the United States and you look at labor market forecasts, a lot of the growth is in food service and service industry jobs. I know that you had some of that within there. And those jobs don't pay a whole lot. And so I think one thing that I would say as we move forward as a council is how do we increase the level of employment wage-wise for people who are going to work for other people, and then how do we make it easy for people who aren't going to be working for other people to add to the economic health of Glenwood Springs. So with that, I'd like to commend you for putting all this data together in under one roof. So it's good to see. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Shelley?
I'd also like to say thank you, Jesse. It's an impressive study and thorough analysis of our economy in the area, and I feel like you've captured Glenwood Springs quite well. I really like the piece on the focus on diversity, because we do have a strong sector that is in construction and the building driven by Up Valley, the economy up there, but it can be cyclical. So I think that having diversity along even beyond tourism, which can also be cyclical with those economic cycles, it helps to have some of those foundational base business services and things like that that are perhaps less cyclical and can provide resilience for our economy in those cycles. So I'd like to see that. I'd like to see us focus on that. And I also feel the same way. I certainly don't want to see this sit on a shelf. So hopefully with staff we can get a work session in the near futures. I think we talked a little bit about earlier, and maybe set out a timeline to really turn this study and these strategies into a working plan, have some short and long-term goals, and work to that in the near future. So thank you.
Thanks, Shelley. Todd?
So I'm hoping that we develop or accept this study tonight, the strategy, if you will. And Jen and Deborah, I will be all in with you guys. And and it is just that. It's a strategy. I mean, this document, it doesn't lay out, you know, go start this business, go do this, this, and this. This is an overall culture of Glenwood Springs. It's an overall brand of Glenwood Springs. I mean, back when I lived in Aspen, I lasted there 9 months. I hated the brand. I moved to Glenwood Springs 25 years ago because this is, if you will, the brand that I wanted to live under. I understood this town. This is who I wanted to be, where I wanted to live. So, I mean, I was just sitting here like jumping out of my seat about this report. And if this is who we decide to be, we can be the best at this in the entire western slope of Colorado if we actually choose to implement some of these strategies and we actually decide to be who this report says that we can continue to be. And a lot of this we already are, and we're actually really good at a lot of this, and we can be even better at some of it. So for us to adopt this tonight, just know that I'm going to refer back to this thing a lot. You only got 4 months left to hear me refer back to it, but I will. And Mike's exactly right. Our second day on council, we went in and told our past city manager that we wanted to market Glenwood Springs, and he laughed at us. And he goes, "What are you guys going to do, sell Glenwood?" Well, yeah, it's what you do. You sell your brand. You sell your community to people. You sell your community to businesses. Do you want to come and work in this town under our culture? Do you want to work in this town under our infrastructure, under our regulations? And if we do, and this is what we want to adopt, then it starts from council to staff to everybody that is involved in getting people through processes, getting people through community development, passing regulations that are consistent and easy to understand, that don't change and move all over the place where we create uncertainty. It's infrastructure, like what we've done on 7th Street. The infrastructure we put on 7th Street, game changer for Glenwood Springs. We now have outdoor dining. The infrastructure that CDOT brought to the table with that new bridge, game changer. So the government can do a lot. I used to think government was the problem with most things. The government can do a lot, and it's regulations, infrastructure, and a culture. You know, are we creating a culture that people want to do business under, or are we creating a culture similar to some of our Up Valley towns that say, we don't want any more people up here, we're going to be an exclusive town, you guys move on down Valley and drive in, and thanks for coming up and working for us. I don't think that's who Glenwood wants to be, and this report says that's not who we want to be. So that's why I hope we adopt it. There's a lot we can do in here, and a lot we can do better, and a lot we already do very well. And especially, I will give Deborah and her staff a lot of credit, because we did not do this well before, and I think we have made huge strides with doing this much better, and Jen, yourself too. So thanks for focusing on this. And Mike, there's a lot of times you show up and I don't agree with a lot you say, but you hit it right on the head. Follow through and focus. I mean, we're either going to follow through with this and agree. That's why I said, if we're going to follow through with this and pass this tonight and say, yeah, we like this strategy, this is who we want Glenwood to be, and we focus on this, we will be seen as a great business culture, a great place to live and raise your family, and a place that you can actually afford to be in this valley, and make it live and work and breathe in this town, and not push you on down west. You know, don't go on that way. We want you here. So I'm all in. I hope we adopt this.
Thanks, Todd.
Just be careful if we adopt it, because I'm all in.
Jim?
Yeah, well, with that, I'll go ahead and make a motion, if I may, that we adopt the economic development strategy that was presented to us this evening.
Second.
We have a motion by Jim and a second by Todd to adopt the economic development strategy. Any further discussion? No. Let's go ahead and call the question.
Yes.
You're on the screen. You don't have your
no, he wants to be on here. Have you logged in?
Yeah. Yes.
His screen. screen
I
is
just have a
not.
black screen.
Yeah, his screen is.
Button again.
Did I vote over here?
No. Okay, now you got to get back to somehow your. Go to that tab.
So this packet?
Tab. There.
Here?
No. Where is that? I don't know where you. No, up above. See that tab?
Oh.
No, that's not it. Huh. We got to get Steve back on his screen somehow. I'm not sure how we got.
And just do a voice vote, like cover.
Yeah, you guys can just do a voice vote.
I said yes.
You did say yes.
Oh.
Okay, he's back.
I'm glad I got out of my chair.
All right.
And hit OK. Did you hit OK?
Yeah.
I did.
There you go. I did it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next item, ordinance number 29, series of 2018. An ordinance of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, amending the 2018 appropriation ordinance to reflect actual revenues and expenditures during fiscal year 2018, including anticipated revenues and expenditures. This is a one-reading ordinance. Hi, Yvette.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a yearly reappropriation that we do. As you know, the budget is a living document and things happen throughout the year, so this is just kind of shoring up and anticipating what it will look like at the end to make our budget balance.
All right. Any questions for Yvette on this ordinance?
If I may say one thing?
Yes.
I just wanted to thank Yvette, who pulled this together 2 weeks earlier than she thought she was going to, because we don't have a meeting on December 20th. So thank you.
So you kind of scrambled.
Yes, I did.
I'm assuming you're working weekends, nights. No comment, huh?
You really don't have.
Because at the same time, we just learned that you're spending a significant amount of time helping implement the ERP.
Yes.
So, all right. Thank you
Yeah,
for all your
thanks,
efforts.
Yvette.
Any other questions for Yvette? Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment on this ordinance? All right, seeing none, I will close it and bring it back to council for discussion and or motion. Jim.
Yeah, I'll move that we adopt ordinance number 29, an ordinance of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, amending the 2018 appropriation ordinance to reflect actual revenues and expenditures during fiscal year 2018, including anticipated revenues and expenditures during the month of December 2018.
Second.
A motion by Jim and a second by Steve to adopt ordinance number 29, series of 2018. Any further discussion? Okay, let's go ahead and call the question.
Cup yes, Voorhees yes, Leahy yes, Gamba yes, Davis yes, Ingraham yes. Motion passes.
Moving on, our next item is ordinance number 30, series of 2018, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, appropriating funds for fiscal year 2019. This is also a one-reading ordinance.
Good evening, everybody. This ordinance references next year's budget, 2019. So we submitted it on October 4th. We had a public hearing on the 18th, and then you guys voted to approve the budget on November 1st. This ordinance then appropriates the funds with which Deborah will use to carry out that budget.
I think you'll be needing to do a supplemental appropriation, perhaps.
That's not impossible. Okay. Keep bringing in $7 million at a time.
Roughly $7,155,000, but give or take. Yep. All right. Any questions for Steve on this? All right. Thanks, Steve. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment on this item? Seeing none, I will close the public comment and bring it back to council for discussion and or motion.
I move that we approve ordinance number 30, series of 2018, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, appropriating funds for fiscal year 2019.
Second.
A motion by Rick and a second by Steve to adopt ordinance number 30, series of 2018. Any further discussion? Let's go ahead and call the question. All right, moving on, we have a presentation and discussion regarding landfill equipment purchase. Good evening, Mr. Public Works Director, Co-Public Works Director.
Council? 1 second. So we are here tonight to discuss the equipment necessary to actually operate the landfill. King is here, Robin is here, and Nigel is also here if there's any questions outside of what I am not able to answer for this. There are basically four pieces of equipment that are necessary to run the landfill and the composting operations. And I realized that we had not actually seen these pieces of equipment before in front of council, so I wasn't sure everybody understood what they are. And the costs and abilities for either purchase or leasing of these pieces of equipment. Within the staff report and the business plan, you'll see that there are 2 options for a waste compactor. This is the piece of machinery that basically when you dump the waste, this pushes it around and compacts it into the landfill in an appropriate manner, trying to hit that 1,200 pounds per cubic yard kind of compaction rate that we need to make the landfill run along the landfill as long as possible. I'll move through these things a little bit quickly. One option we have right now is to rent or lease a CAT 816K, which is a modified version of a wheeled front-end loader from Caterpillar. It has some pluses, it has some minuses. As you saw in the report, it's about $117,000 a year to lease this piece of equipment. It comes with a 5-year, 7,500 hour full premier warranty. So they come fix it. They do periodic maintenance on it. And for the first year, that warranty will cover travel time and those kinds of things to come out and actually service the piece of equipment. The other piece of equipment that is kind of the preferred option from King and Nigel out at the landfill is the adjacent piece, which is a Bomag 772. It does virtually the same thing. Kind of one of the major differences is the CAT actually has drive shafts and has differentials in it. So as it's moving through the landfill, there is a little bit of an opportunity for those drive shafts to break and come in contact with, we'll call it debris, within the landfill itself, whereas the Bomag is a hydraulically driven piece of equipment. Each wheel has its own hydraulic motor. Has a big belly pan underneath of it. There are actually just hydraulic lines that run those that are tucked up under the piece of machinery. It's actually built and was designed to be a compactor at a landfill. And I'm not downplaying the CAT. It is a very nice piece of equipment. But we have an opportunity to purchase actually from our current landfill operator a Bomag 772 out of Kansas City that he is no longer using. They are shutting down a landfill there. He has got it sitting there just as a backup piece of equipment currently. Market value for that piece of equipment is about $325,000. He has offered it to us at $275,000. The warranty is still transferable. It is a 5-year, 10,000 hour warranty, and we have a Pico provider down in Grand Junction that would be willing to service that piece of equipment for us. So I just kind of wanted to show you the 2 pieces of equipment that are our main options for a compactor out at the landfill. The 772, as you can see, is a little heavier. It is an 81,000 pound machine versus a 56,000 pound machine. It will actually compact with less rolling crossings across the landfill than the previous machine. I'm going to flip through these. We can go back or we can do questions one by one if you want to.
Anyone have questions regarding the CAT 816K versus the Bomag 772?
I'm just curious on that Bomag, and I think that is the piece of equipment of choice probably, because I've seen, the issues with drivetrains hanging down in garbage. But did we shop around? Is there other? Did these guys just call us up? I mean, if you go out nationally, there's rags out there that tell you.
So you want to be kind of careful when you buy something used.
Yeah.
You want to make sure you have all the service records for it, all the oil records for it, because they do periodic. They take oil samples, make sure there's not too many metallics in it, it's not burnt, those kinds of fun things. You want to be careful when you purchase one. This piece of equipment, 772, brand new, I think was $670,000. At 5,000 hours, it's probably about a third away through its usable life. So we should get 3 to 4, maybe 5 more years out of this, depending on how long we're operating it. Did we go out and shop them? No. We have been talking to the PECO distributor, power equipment company distributor out of Grand Junction, and they feel that this is a very, very good price for this piece of equipment. And they have used one themselves. We could actually lease one from them if we really wanted to. But if you look at the lease rental rates, it's $117,000 for the Cat. In 2 years, plus or minus, we would actually be paying for this other piece of equipment instead of continuing to lease it for the 5 years. So if you go through a full lease, which I'm going to, at the end, I'll show options for leases versus purchases and totals for those things, it actually makes sense in this particular case to probably purchase a piece of equipment. And we've got the PECO guy saying, if you can buy it, you should buy it.
Yeah, no
and
doubt
it's being
in my
hauled
mind.
here for free also. Larry, who's been very generous in offering us equipment out there and trying to do deals and try to make it so that it's an easy transition over, pretty much is losing $25,000 on this sale to us.
No doubt in my mind that's the right choice.
Yeah.
To make.
So have we shopped around? Shopping around.
Lot somewhere where you could kick tires and.
Well, shopping around, you'd go to the PECO guy.
I don't think I'd kick that tire.
And the shopping around would be going to actually the power equipment company and saying, could you get us one of these? Because they kind of take them back off of lease, they put them back out. They'll have high hours on them. They'll refurbish them a little bit, but at the same time, they're telling us it's a good piece of equipment.
Yeah.
Are we gonna drive that thing?
Good.
We could probably work on something.
Fun to drive.
Nigel's always up for a good day.
So Matt, I got to ask, as a kind of a cyclist, why would you put a carbon wheel on a Cat?
So I am not 100% on the Karen wheels. They are, and this is why I have King here, he could probably answer this question a little bit better. But the wheels that are on the Cat 6.1 or 8.16 itself are okay for traction, but you want more spikes on to get more compaction. So you'd have to spend, and it's a recommendation, it's not a 100% requirement, it's a recommendation to buy the upcharge to $98,000 for the additional Karen wheels. If you want a full explanation of Karen wheels, I'm sure we could get
I think we're good.
King up here. But it was 100% recommended.
A question on the BOMAG, do we have, who will maintain that for us?
PECO.
PECO will?
Yes.
Okay, so they can
We
service
would get,
that.
just like the lease comes with a warranty, this will come with a transferable warranty. We've already verified that through PECO.
Okay.
We would just purchase a periodic maintenance agreement with them, so they're coming up and changing the injectors in 1,000 hours or changing the oil, those kinds of things. We haven't got a solid price on what that is. Mm-hmm. It's not a huge number, but we'll roll that into the business model. You saw in the staff report there was a draft business model,
right,
and that would have to be added to the cost.
Okay, but it looks, at first glance numbers, it looks like kind of life cycle costs if you're looking out 3 to 5 years for, it's a better deal for the BOMAG and a better piece of, heavier duty piece of equipment.
We were in conversations with Eagle. They're potentially going to sell their 772 and upsize to the next piece of equipment, and they were looking at the sale price of $450. Okay. That was their initial conversation point. So,
yeah. And
it's approximately the same hours as this piece of equipment is also.
Okay.
So Larry is moving out of the trash business in Kansas City, and he sees an opportunity to help us and also, in essence, offload a piece of equipment, which is fine with us.
Right. Great. Okay.
All right, any other questions on this piece of equipment?
Next piece of equipment, you've all seen one of these. This is just a D6 dozer. We would actually be renting this. They're fairly inexpensive to rent. And this this one and the wheeled loader, there is 2 reasons to rent them. One, we feel like the D6 dozer is an appropriate size. It's what's being used out there currently. But as we rent them, we will have the opportunity after a year or 2, if we think that we need a D8 or a D4, we'll be in the rental process with CATS, and we will be able to switch those rentals if we would like to. There's always a finance fee for those kinds of fun things, but we're not married to a piece of equipment that we feel like this is what will be needed out there. It's what's been operating at the landfill for the last 10 years. But if we really want to get serious and start creating cover material, we found that the shale out there is a little rough. If we wanted to use it to do the same thing, then we would probably upsize to a D8.
So they're currently using the D6 to, my understanding is we're ripping shale and allowing it to weather to use for alternate daily cover. Is that?
Yes. They use an excavator and
so they're using the excavator and the rippers on the D6?
Yes.
Okay.
And recently the contractor has mentioned he hit some shale. He actually busted his gas tank. It was tweaking the machine so much. So, you know, we've avoided that area at this point, but in the future we may have to move back into some of those areas to extend the life of this facility. So this one is a 60-month lease. It comes with a 5-year, 7,500-hour warranty. It's all these equipments are the USA EPA Tier 4 emissions rating, which means that they're as low emissions as they possibly can be for this type of piece of equipment. And we're looking at about $90,000 a year to lease it with the warranty, and it comes with the service on top of that.
Any questions about the leasing of that? All right, thanks.
Next thing is a CAT 938, which is a wheeled front end loader. You guys have all seen these things. And at the end of the last slide, I'll kind of go through what these are used for out at the landfill. This piece of equipment, you can get approximately a 3 cubic yard bucket. You can get them all the way up to 5 or 6 yards. We'd probably stick with the smaller version of it until King says we need a bigger one. It is also at Tier 4 emissions. It's 5-year, 7,500-hour warranty. This is the least expensive piece of equipment. It's $52,000 a year, or about $4,400 a month. Once again, nice to lease this piece of equipment if we get into more concrete work. We want to do massive amounts of composting like Pitkin County is. You know, you probably saw that article, I think, in yesterday's paper. You know, we might want to upsize this piece of equipment. So if we're leasing it, that gives us an opportunity to potentially swap it out for a larger piece of equipment. And these do take a fair amount of abuse. It will get used for quite a few things out at the landfill.
Thanks. Any questions regarding the loader?
Tell me if I'm getting too boring here. Excavator, once again, everybody's seen an excavator. We're looking at purchasing an excavator. There's a reason for that. They are fairly inexpensive to purchase with low hours. You can get a 3,000 to 4,000 hour piece of equipment for, you know, around $125,000. To rent this, we would be probably around 2 years. We would pay for that in itself. We would need this for continuing the composting opportunities out at the landfill. If we partner with somebody, it's potentially we would just lend it to them. If we do that composting ourselves, then this would be a piece of equipment that we'd be using on a daily basis for that composting operations. You know, we've looked at not removing, but trying to figure out an alternate way to get rid of grease, septic, and car wash materials. And we can do septic and car wash with ponds. That's a fairly simple thing to do. We can dig ponds, line them, meet the regulations for those linings and under drain systems. But the grease is a problem. To get it to solidify is kind of a nasty business. We don't know what size pond that would be. So it makes sense to continue the composting, at least for the grease, if nothing else. Plus, that would also reduce the amount of cardboard that we would need because we're just doing grease. We're not trying to do all of them. You know, reduce the amount of vegetation we have to take in. So our composting abilities would be reduced at the moment, but we would still be able to take in the grease, which we've heard from all of the businesses that is a vital piece for them. Or they have to drive all the way to West Rifle, and that is kind of a hit or miss also out there whether they'll take it or not. So we're looking at purchasing with a base price of, you know, $125,000 for an excavator to continue those operations.
So I have a question on that piece of equipment, and in thinking of, you know, I see the draft plan and the draft plan on addressing the taking in of the waste liquids for the car washes, septic, and then the grease programs. I am hoping that we'll have the opportunity at the council level to talk about policy issues associated with that and how we want to address that at the landfill, you know, what best practices are, what we've been doing in the past, and just get a very clear picture of that. So if we purchase equipment at this point, before we've had an opportunity to have some of those policy discussions out there, are we locked into that concept of the ponds? Because I have concerns that, you know, if we're going to be building additional ponds at this point and doing the compost, are we getting into higher costs? But at the same time, you know, are we doing best practices environmentally and being responsible stewards of those materials and of the environment? So I want to see us in taking over operations of the landfill, as I'm sure staff wants to do also, but actually setting the bar high on our stewardship of the environment out there, as well as maximizing our life of that landfill, because landfill space will be no more, you know, after that landfill closes. So it behooves us to divert as much material as we can and to use the fill of that landfill as maximum efficiency as we can. So if we're purchasing equipment right now and looking at that, is that setting us down a certain path, or are we going to have the opportunity to really get a good understanding of the business plan and see where we're going before we're locked in?
Well, I think the kind of generic answer to that question is no, it's not locking us into anything. It is actually providing us a piece of equipment for what I believe, you know, council, at least in your perspective, is composting is good. Pickett County has proof that.
Right.
You know, they have not franchising, but regulations to require composting. They're promoting composting. That's actually taking a fair amount of materials from the landfill, putting in their compost operations and pulling it from there. So it's
and they're turning a profit on it, contrary to what we've been able to do to date. So
correct. And at a certain point, we may saturate the valley's market for compost.
Right.
But yes, I think we're purchasing it for the intent of it still gives us the good ability to continue our composting product.
Okay.
You know, we're not going to get the ponds built right away. There's time in the business plan and the sizing of those things to discuss whether we want 6 ponds or can it be 4 ponds. You know, what's the volume? Do we want to aerate it so we don't have to have so much volume, but we can still continue to do operations in the wintertime? Because obviously when you put septic into the pond, you're evaporating it back into nature, and then we're using the sludge on the bottom of it, drying it, and putting it into the landfill itself, and we're creating, you know, organic matter there. So it's kind of still leaving our opportunities wide open, I guess, by buying a piece of equipment like this. That's why we're not leasing it. That's why we're not buying a brand spanking new one, is we're trying to be cost effective on it, but still continue those landfill operations. Because when we take over, it'll be April 1st. So there'll be snow on the ground if this continues.
Right.
So composting will be extremely important to the situation, because we don't know when we'll be able to build ponds, but hopefully by then we'll know how many to build, if we're going to build them, and what size they're going to be. So it's almost a necessary piece of equipment just to continue on until we have all those exact answers on sizing. So the ponds are also nice, because if we could build the ponds correctly, we could actually create cover material for the landfill. So we'd be doing 2 things at one time: creating a pond for taking in septic and car wash, but also creating necessary landfill cover on a daily basis for the landfill itself per regulations.
Rather than excavating more.
Rather than cutting into the hillside and continuing on. So, but I think taking operations in-house actually gives us a lot more opportunities to have these discussions and make changes a little bit more rapidly than having an operator on site, have to discuss it with them. How much is it going to cost? What are their operating expenses? You know, and are we actually going to make money off of it or not, or just break even kind of thing. So.
Right. Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does, as far as this equipment purchase, and I'll just look forward to getting the business plan nailed down and see where we go with that.
There's definitely fine tuning on the business plan. We were trying to get you a good idea of kind of, if we were to do everything we wanted to do in 2019 to accommodate virtually everything, it's a cost. Is that cost 100% necessary? Probably not. We can probably downsize that if we figure out all these little pieces and puzzle them together correctly to still provide the services that we want to provide at the landfill.
Okay.
And this gets us down the road as we're operating currently, and if we decide to change direction, we can always sell this stuff.
Correct. That's 100% correct.
How long does it take to acquire? I mean, is it like a months-long process, or once we pull the string, it happens fairly quickly?
So as long as council is approving of us purchasing potentially the 2 pieces of used equipment and leasing 2 new pieces of equipment, the 2 new pieces of equipment can take several months to get going, which is why we're here now instead of waiting until January. If we agreed to purchase the BOMAG, Larry would have that delivered to us sometime in February, so we could get it here, inspect it, make sure everything is as we expect it to be, so there's no surprises April 1st. And then the piece of the excavator, we would go out and do some research on that from some of the local providers and choose one. We've got our eyes on a few of them, we've been watching them, so we have a good idea of how much those things cost. That would be a more immediate purchase if we wanted to make it, because obviously they're up for sale at this point and they want them out the door. So we would like to be tooled up mid-February, beginning of March, to make sure everything is on site, everything is operating the way we expect it to be. Nobody forgot this piece of equipment, that piece of equipment, the attachment needs a 12-pin connector to run it, those kinds of fun things.
Makes sense.
So that we're not struggling on day one. So just a quick use, compactor, it's trash compaction only, that's all that gets used for on the site. Bulldozer is cover material spreading, trash spreading, it helps the compactor if it's behind or down, and then site work as needed. Creating cover material if we wanted to use it that way. Currently in the business plan we have a secondary contractor coming in and helping us create that cover material. Wheel loader, cover material dumping, pushing metal, wood, cardboard, tire, and concrete piles up. And then we'd be able to load customers that purchase compost and dirt from us with that particular piece of equipment. And then the excavator, we will have to do grindings if we continue composting, so the excavator can be used to feed the grinder, process compost, maintain stormwater settlement ponds. There's quite a few uses for the excavator on the site outside of just compost. Now here's the big one. None of this information's new, it's just compiled in a little bit different format. If we were to lease the dozer, lease the compactor, I'm just giving you options here just so you can see why we've kind of gone the direction we did. Lease the wheel loader and purchase the excavator, that's $1.5 million over the life of those leases, so we'll call that a 5-year lifespan. Option 2 is to lease the dozer, purchase the compactor from Larry, release the wheel loader as we talked about, and then purchase the excavator. We're down to $1.2 million. You just save $300,000 plus or minus dollars by not leasing a $600,000 piece of equipment, but purchasing a very good piece of equipment for $275,000. Then option 3 is to purchase, and purchase. There is that opportunity to purchase the dozer, purchase the 938, the wheel loader, and we save a little bit of money. You can see the dozer's on $479,000 versus $467,000. So it's a $12,000 savings over 12 years. We didn't feel that was worth the cost for the potential opportunity to swap that piece of equipment if we wanted to in the future. So what as staff in essence is asking for is the opportunity to move forward with option number 2, which is the 2 leases and the 2 purchases for these prices that you're seeing in front of you.
Matt, does the option 3 on the purchases, does that include maintenance, operational costs for that purchase dozer?
Yes,
so it does.
they still carry the 5-year 7,500-hour warranty and the premier warranty, or the maintenance on it.
Okay.
It's just the periodic maintenance, though. Anything outside of it, if we break something, we're misusing the equipment, that is an additional cost.
Okay.
And we will budget a certain amount for that. I currently have CAT doing projections. Apparently nobody's ever asked them how much we should budget for standard breakage within these pieces of equipment on a year. So they're taking a little time to get that number right.
Who is putting that together?
Caterpillar.
Okay.
But we figured we put a business plan together, we should account for all potential costs out there. So, and that is the end of my presentation.
So, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
You still lack a very large dump truck.
So that would be in the business plan. Actually, we would be swapping a very large tandem axle dump truck with a blade, with a sand spreader, with a stainless steel bed, which we would want for the kind of products that we're moving around out there from the streets department. That it is too large of a piece of equipment actually for what we do for snow plowing in the city. And they would like to sell it to the landfill so that we can buy a smaller piece of equipment to accommodate for that.
Well, I'm thinking of the one that I see out there that's like it for a mining operation, and it's what you're moving shale with for your daily cover. Is that not still out there?
It is actually owned by Larry, and he does run the rock truck out there. It's not 100% necessary that we run a 40-ton rock truck around out there to accommodate what we're trying to do.
Okay.
Would it be nice? Yes. I'm not sure we have the $700,000 or $800,000 to accommodate that at this point.
Yeah.
But we are swapping to be cost effective internally. One department would like a different piece of equipment. This actually works very well for what we would like to. King likes it. And we can plow snow out there during the winter time on top of using the loader for that kind of piece of that kind of stuff. And it has a spreader associated with it already because it is a streets department piece of equipment. So.
And you can use it to move that cover with?
We can use it to move the material, yes.
Yeah.
And the loader ends up moving the material a lot too, depending on where it is.
Right. It's kind of a long ways. It's quite a trip.
Depending on where the material is stored at, because currently it's up top pretty high, so it's not actually too long a trip.
Yeah, I like your option too. I think you need flexibility on that dozer. I think I'm concerned about that D6 versus the D8.
Yeah. We are too a little bit, but it's what's been out there for this time, and it's been operating fairly well. And we'll come back and talk business plan more, but you'll see all these little pieces of minutia. You know, the streets department is giving King a truck for his use out there with a plow on it and a little mini spreader. You know, so we're trying to swap internally as much as we possibly can to keep pieces of equipment in-house and cost-effective.
And we already own the water truck.
We do. Actually, that is another purchase. King will be purchasing that, so it's on site on a continuous basis. Once again, it's a very nice water truck. It's probably a little bit big for what we do in the city itself. We probably need a single axle water truck in the 1,500 gallon range versus a double in the 3,000 gallon range. But for what they do at the landfill, it's perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're just kind of migrating things around to be more effective for what we're doing.
Do we have to open this up for comment?
Well, it's listed for public comment. Is there any other questions for Matt before I open it up for public comment? Right, is there anyone in the public who would like to comment on the landfill equipment options? Come on up if you would to the...
I'm actually working with King. I'd just like to...
Come on up, Nigel.
I'd just like to go back to the BOMAG situation. King and I, we've done a lot of work together. We went up to a few landfills, and one of the comments that we had from the drivers of the CAT compactor was, I'm not going to get in one of those again, because they got beat up. They had one up at Summit for a year, and they got rid of it because the guys were going to walk off site, because it's so rough on the body. So that's, looking at the BOMAG, and also obviously we run a BOMAG up here too. It's a lot more comfortable, and obviously thinking about the staff, as well. That's all I want to say. And also the other thing that they commented on at Summit was they had problems with bad wire wrap on the CAT, and the BOMAG, we don't have any problems with that at the landfill. Obviously we do get wire in, and they're always having to cut the wire off of the CAT because of the wheels, the way they're made up. Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
Great.
Thanks, Nigel. Any other comment on the landfill equipment purchase? All right, I will close it to public comment, bring it back to council for discussion and/or motion.
Matt, you may have answered this question, but to move the dump truck from our existing inventory in streets to the landfill. What are the financial implications of that?
So the dump truck and the water truck would be sold as one package. There would be a purchase price. We'd be selling it from one department to the next department. It would be $190,000. So that would include the water truck, the tandem truck, the stainless steel bed, the spreader, the plow, everything that goes along with it. The truck itself is probably, when we purchased it, was well above that with all the attachments, and they're all attachments that King will be using out there. So what will happen is that money, in theory, I've talked to Steve and Yvette how this functions, you know, where it really goes to, it's probably the general fund, would go back to the streets department, and actually Larry at the landfill is also offering up his 2016 Dodge 5500 with a plow and a spreader and everything on it for $49,000 with 14,000 miles on it, which is a $75,000 to $80,000 vehicle. It's exactly what the streets department wanted to bring in. So, you know, there's going to be some horse trading internally, you know, some swapping of the cash and potentially purchasing more things from Larry. But the intent is to get the streets department the two pieces of equipment they really would like to replace the larger truck with, which is smaller 1-ton vehicles that are quicker, they're faster, they're more maneuverable in town. The big truck is great for really snowy days. It's a little excessive probably for the city streets with the snow removal contract that we have with Gould now especially.
So are there any other sorts of purchases then envisioned for the street department beyond this sort of net swap?
You know, the street department has done quite nicely this year, so we'll probably tone it down a little bit for 2019. But in essence, they would like 2 of those trucks to replace the one, so that every operator they have available, and even SWAT, if we had to bring in Mike and the guys, having a truck available to them to actually plow snow on the heavy days. So right now, those are really the 2 pieces that they're looking at. It's just 2 trucks with plows.
Well, and those guys really do beautiful work. I don't know if people in Glenwood know how lucky we are to have somebody driving by and cleaning your streets at 4 o'clock in the morning, and you know they're out there till the job gets done. So.
Yep, they're doing a good job this year.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion then that that we direct the staff to proceed with the purchase and lease transaction set forth in option number 2 of your presentation.
I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion by Jim and a second by Shelley to proceed with equipment purchase option number 2. And Shelley, your light was blinking. Did you want to say anything more?
No, I was just going to make the same motion, so thanks, Jim. I do feel like staff, looks like you guys have really done your due diligence and looked into a lot of options for the vehicles. I think we're going down this path, so we need to get the equipment ordered so that we can be ready to go at the beginning of April. And I do have confidence that we can do a good job on this. So I'm looking forward to seeing more on the business report. I would like to go and see us put a really solid business plan together and go through that and look at the intentions and the goals on that. So I look forward to that. But I'll support the purchase at this time.
Thanks, Shelley. Steve?
No, I'm just sitting third in line to make the motion. I thought I was in a more appropriate position to make the motion, being that I'm the best customer that the landfill has at this dais.
Hey, I'm out there too.
No,
I'd like to get in line for that also.
I rode my mountain bike past it 2 months ago. Does that count? So,
Nigel, do you see me or Todd more?
I'm not going to comment on
He's a smart guy.
All right.
All right. So we have a motion and a second to proceed with equipment purchase option number 2. Any further discussion? And I got to get back to my screen. Let's go ahead and call the question.
Oh.
I voted.
Yeah, I think so.
I think I voted.
Hopefully I did.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay, next item is Resolution 2018-60, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, finding that one or more blighted areas exist in the City of Glenwood Springs, the need for the redevelopment and rehabilitation of such areas in accordance with the Colorado Urban Renewal Law, declaring it to be in the public interest that the Glenwood Springs Urban Renewal Authority exercise the powers provided by law and designating the City Council and representatives of affected taxing bodies as the Urban Renewal Authority. Do we have a presentation on this?
Good evening again. I'd like to actually turn this over to our consultant, Ann Ricker from Ricker Cunningham, to go through this. And we also have with us Paul Benedetti, our attorney, and then also Carolyn White is here representing them all. And if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but I think that Ann has quite a presentation for you.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Let's see here. This is where you hope there's nothing embarrassing on your flash drive. There wasn't, so we're good. Okay. So, as you know, we met with Planning Commission October, that's right. And at the end, we've got essentially one recommendation they had that we wanted to share with you before dropping it into the plan. So I'm going to cover that at the end, but that was a good meeting. We got good input, and I think Jen shared some of that, their opinion about its consistency with the comprehensive plan with you in your packet. So what we have here, I often refer to the lead up to your consideration of an urban renewal plan and the preparation of those documents as a three-legged stool. There's 3 documents that have to be put together. All of those have been completed. The first is the conditions survey. And what happens there is that the area of study gets defined, usually by staff, sometimes by staff and actual property owners or business interests in the area, why it's being pursued. And we're essentially given that, and then we go out within that area and we evaluate what the conditions are, and the boundaries, or kind of the parameters in terms of conditions that we're looking for, are really, we take our lead from the 11 factors of blight, the horrible word we all hate to use, but it's a legal term only. I don't want anybody to get offended. But we take those 11 factors, and we've identified over many, many years, many similar reports like this, what those representative conditions are that suggest the presence of one or more of those factors. So all of that gets packaged into the conditions survey. The next step is preparation of the urban renewal plan. And just so you know, something we always take up right away with Planning Commission, you know, in a way it's almost too bad that it's called a plan, because to a planning commissioner, that's really their purview. You know, they think in terms of downtown plans and corridor plans and comprehensive plans. But for all intents and purposes, an urban renewal plan is very much a financing and a legal document. And you probably noticed that it's not very attractive, pretty light on images, you know, not something they're more used to seeing. And so we always say that while you weren't involved, and this is all because of the statute and kind of the process for laying it out, while you weren't necessarily involved in your traditional way in the preparation of this, quote, plan, your role going forward is incredibly important, because they will be a partner with the Urban Renewal Authority, with City Council, in considering projects that come into the area, and whether, again, they are consistent with established rules and regulations, and hopefully holding them to a high standard, as is part of your vision expressed in, you know, those policy documents like the comp plan that they follow. So I think they understood that, and again, it allowed us to have a very focused discussion on what their role was, which was specifically to say, was the plan as written consistent with what is reported in the comprehensive plan, okay? And then that third leg of the stool, and again, we've highlighted all of them, is, we call it the county impact report. Up until a few years ago, when the urban renewal legislation changed, people refer to House Bill 1348, really what the statute required was that an impact report be prepared, but it most specifically identified the county where the project was located. Now, I can tell you that even though it just was specific about the county, I think all of my client community said, no, let's prepare one for all the taxing entities so that we can have a dialogue and talk about impacts if there are, good, bad, all of that. So the law may have changed, but our practice stayed exactly the same, to have dialogue, a dialogue with those taxing entities. Now, in this instance, and your city manager and staff can speak more specifically to what happened here, but the way this plan is written, the dialogue with the taxing entities really comes into play when you're talking about incremental collection of property tax and or sales tax. So if this plan goes forward and that is a provision of it, that would be the time that you would really engage in those discussions, wanting to understand both sides of the table in that. The next, where are we here? Oh, hang on, just right there. There we go. Now we can move forward. So after we go through all of that, and really where we are tonight is at the top of the page, which is bringing that information to you for consideration. There's two aspects that you're really being asked to weigh in on today. Do you accept our report, our independent report of the conditions that we observed? We don't make a finding in that way. We just present that independent information to you, and as part of your consideration of adoption of the plan is accepting those findings as we presented them. The second piece is your consideration of adoption of the urban renewal plan. And then the last step, probably the most important, is going forward with property owners, with business interests in the area, and really in partnership advancing projects within the area. So here you can see the map, and it looks a little funny, but I wanted to make sure I explained that to you. We had another map that was a little, just had a yellow line around the subject parcels, and rightfully so, someone on the Planning Commission said, well, I'm pretty sure I read in the plan that the right-of-ways, certain right-of-ways in the area are also supposed to be included in the plan area, and they were absolutely right. And the way the map was prepared the first time, it didn't necessarily effectively communicate that. And why that's really important, it's not a deal killer if the map isn't exactly right, because we're really relying on a legal description, but the idea is that if there are improvements that need to happen in the adjacent right-of-ways to either offset adverse conditions to the property or to improve those improve how the property performs, by including it, it's just a lot cleaner because then we can say those dollars can get allocated within the boundaries of the area, obviously including within the property and public rights of way. So we made a change there. The yellow boxes that you're seeing, we refer to those as out parcels. Those are not included. So this really was about the one ownership of the mall area, but then also the adjacent rights of way. You can see here, again, just for illustrative purposes, is the zoning map. As you'll see as I go through, we're really, when we're talking about the urban renewal plan and that, we're really trying to address two areas that the statute's very clear about, that when you go forward with an urban renewal plan, your purpose has to be, and this is every urban renewal plan, at least in general, and then you can get more specific, is one, to mitigate and or eliminate those adverse conditions of blight that exist in the area. And the second thing is to implement and advance the community priorities as expressed in your comprehensive plan. It's really both of those things. So we begin here by telling you, what is the zoning in the area? How have you looked at this property in terms of future land uses? What is your vision? What is its role in the future of the community? So I'm going to be talking about the conditions, adverse conditions we observed, because that's one part of the purpose of the plan. And then we'll be referencing things like regulations and elements of your comprehensive plan, because that's the second piece of it. So here are the, quote, 11 factors of blight as they appear in the statute. In our investigation, we found evidence of 10 of the 11. And I'm going to walk you through quickly, but again, ask me any questions, stop me at any point. But you'll see that how it's written, there's a lot of relationship between, you might have something with streets, but if that factor is there, it also applies a couple of different times. And so that's why that number can rise, although we try and look very specifically at each factor and make sure that it stands on its own in terms of the conditions that are there. So in terms of the first one, deteriorating structures, if any of you have been there or walked through, it's obviously an older, aging property. If you walk inside, really that's where it hits you, what's happening. I'm sure you saw the number, it was in the newspaper, and it's in the report here, but at a 90% vacancy, you end up with a lot of spaces that are gated, which is appropriate. They're closed off, but there's a lot of remnant furniture and fixtures. There's holes in the wall where things have been pulled out. It's not been brought to a shape or a condition that it looks brand new and it's ready for repair. That's not wrong or right. That's just the condition that we observed. There's unscreened trash and mechanical equipment all around and along the fence line around the property and within the property. Fencing is inconsistent, sometimes absent, especially next to the gas station to the, I want to say, east. So all kinds of different conditions going on there. In terms of B, inadequate street layout, that can be a deceptive term, but really what they're saying in the statute is not only if you have streets that aren't up to code in terms of ADA compliance, accommodations for non-vehicular mobility, but sometimes when roads just aren't there and should be, or if you have roads to nowhere, or it's actually a through road that's going through a parking lot and people shouldn't be using it for that purpose. So it's fairly broadly described, but these were some of the things that we observed. And to my last point, you've got those out parcels, and then you have associated parking, and then you almost have like an internal roadway system, and then you have the parking facilities associated with the mall. But because there's no curb cuts or barriers or something between those transition areas, I sat there and observed all kinds of people walking in front of cars, and there's just a lot of what we refer to as pedestrian and vehicle confusion and conflict. You've got another interesting thing that happens there is you've got that transit facility on the front side of the property in the southeast corner, and what's happening because of the residential neighborhoods is people are cutting through the parking lot, so that's kind of interesting, and then going to the transit facility, and then the transit facility is right up on, a pretty fast-moving auto roadway, and there's no protections there. So there were some interesting conditions going on associated with that, and all of that might be objective enough, but then we got in touch with the police department for the city and really wanted to look at the number of accidents and incidents, traffic in this category specifically, and to determine if historically they've been increasing or decreasing, or if they're at a disproportionately high level in this area compared to other areas of the city, and actually both of those factors were true. C, here's one of those relationships, faulty lot layout. Because B also deals with problems associated with access and accommodations, C ends up getting picked up because of B. In terms of D, at sanitary and unsafe conditions, really what we focused on here was, again, the lack of accommodations for pedestrians. You know, you have a sidewalk that is unlevel and cracking and not anywhere near code in terms of accommodating people, much less people with disabilities on one side. And then you'll notice where the newer development is on the other side of the street to the west. I think it's a car dealership. It's exactly what you would want: detached sidewalk, level, all of those things. So you know, capturing a street view, you really get both conditions. The other one that was, I thought, very important in this factor, and it shows up again, is a lack of appropriate infrastructure to protect from fire. We were able to get through staff some information that was provided by people within your fire department in terms of water flow and capacity, and also the level of fire infrastructure, protective infrastructure within the building. And this happens a lot. You know, again, this isn't the property owner's fault. What usually triggers this is, well, you might have a property that isn't to code once the code changes, but then different things can trigger it. An investment in the property, an amendment, or increase in a certain amount of square feet, things like that. So it's not necessarily non-compliant in its current condition, but the fact is, it's not what it needs to be, it's not what the code wants it to be, and it will have to be an infrastructure investment eventually. And so anyway, we got those reports from the fire department saying it is not where it needs to be, and definitely where it will have to be if there's any sort of significant redevelopment of the facility. And then also, again, in addition to traffic accidents and incidents, we also spoke with the police department about incidents of crime. And this was truly, if memory serves, if not the highest, one of the highest areas. And it's not just the mall, but you know, they have sub areas within the city. But it's not too far beyond the mall. It's definitely the mall and within the vicinity of the mall. And that's not probably a terrible surprise to you, because that's what happens with high vacancy properties, whether it's vacant land or vacant properties. When you don't have the people there, they tend to experience higher levels of crime. In terms of deterioration of site improvements, again, we mentioned some of the mechanical equipment, leftover trucks, abandoned things that were around the perimeter of the property. The parking facility, it's not bad, but it would definitely, it's not to code. It's, you know, the sidewalk is like this. It's dangerous in terms of anybody that has lost or is losing their peripheral vision. Fencing, all things basically that if you go right to the code, you can see it's not compliant, and it would have to be improved if there was a substantial reinvestment in the property. Little bit of graffiti, not a lot, but just mentioning it. Inadequate public improvements. Got information from both city water and the sewer providing district. Both said that not only suboptimal levels of the water and sewer infrastructure in terms of capacity, but the water mains themselves in that area are primarily asbestos cement, and absolutely, you know, if you had all the money in the world, of course, you know, the city would have made those improvements, and if that was your highest priority and you didn't have a million other things, but this is something that has to get rectified. Similarly with the sewer lines, they're clay. In terms of capacity of the sewer, they said they're about 45% at capacity today, but because of the size of the lines in that, and because of what's envisioned in that area, and how the community's growing, and that they said any sort of significant redevelopment of the property could send that much higher pretty quickly, and they would have to start thinking about supplemental facility needs. And then finally, we've already talked about substandard roadway facilities. The defective or unusual conditions of title, this is really kind of that glaring, this is the glaring condition, right? And it deals with a lease that was signed in 2008. I too am a real estate economist, just like Jesse, and I don't know if he's still here, but I'm pretty sure he'd agree. Are you still here? Well, I know you're going to agree with me. So having worked throughout that period, throughout our country and our state, and especially in retail, you know, we will often hear if a property owner outside of urban renewal, if they come forward and they say, oh, I've got this horrible lease provision and I can't do anything with my property, the outside world saying, why don't they do anything with their property? And then there's this voice, you know, from the choir that says, well, isn't that their own fault if they got into it? Well, I'm here to tell you that the fact that you still have an operating mall, even at 90%, that signed leases during 2008 and went through the Great Recession, it's a gift. Many went out of business. You know, we all kind of had to do what we could to get by. The first thing when I heard about this was, I said, what's the date? What was the date this was signed? It's like, oh, okay, there you go. So just to highlight some of those provisions that truly are like a stranglehold. Let's see, provisions which extend extraordinary control to a single lessee getting to weigh in on who the tenants are, who gets to expand. As I understood it, at least in our research and our discussions, many opportunities had to go by the wayside to fill spaces there because of that level of control. Unable to freely manage and market the property because of that. The period of control, even from today going forward, given the lease options, renewal options, and that was about 30 years. Lack of autonomous control over the choice of lessees has to be conferred with and weighed in on by, and then a lease rate that literally is essentially capped way below market and for that period of time, for 30 years. So again, Jesse's absolutely right about the fact that it's really hard to get market-wide real estate information, not unusual at all in a community about this size, but we were able to get some professionals to weigh in, and I believe the number, they said citywide you're at about a 3% retail vacancy rate, and this property's at 90%. And you don't have very much land, which I think Jesse made that point too. In terms of H, existence of conditions that endanger property from fire, again, related to all the things we mentioned before, anything that is going to show up as a traffic accident, incident, or high levels of crime, much less a lack of adequate fire protection, pretty much falls within this category. J, and I want to be really careful about describing why we considered this to be present. It's not that today someone would say, you know, if they did a phase 1, there is environmental contamination, but we read through about this many pages of documents about 3 specific and past environmental incidents that happened in the area. And while we read all the way through and said, okay, you know, did the state sign off on this? Is it perfect? Really where we were left after reading all those documents is that on one level they signed off and said you can go forward, but at another level there was, we'll have to revisit this. If this happens, this could happen. You know, a variety of conditions, basically. And what that said to us, from our experience in other projects, we had one in Glendale years and years ago, was they too had a past environmental effect, and that city then said to anybody kind of in the path of where that had been, that if they wanted to go underground with underground parking or anything, I'm not saying your city would do this, but this is very real, that they had to put in an extraordinarily high level of infrastructure in terms of fan to make sure the air circulates. They could only go down a certain level, which essentially limited their development envelope. It had a huge monetary impact. We don't know how big the monetary impact could be because of that, were there to be a substantial modification of the property. I just wanted you to know why we reported on that factor. And then the last one, K5, I've already told you about the disproportionately high levels of municipal services. We also looked at medical service, and again, it was higher in that area for whatever reason. The second part of K5, it's really 2 things. It's high levels of municipal service or vacancy. Well, you guys had both, obviously, in this area. And then also, just to kind of remind ourselves that we're looking at this in the context of how you envision this property going forward, it's technically underutilized in terms of how you see that property going forward. So we add that comment there. It does nothing more than kind of put a period on our other assumptions and conclusions related to our finding with that factor. So we just have a couple more slides. So in terms of the urban renewal plan, this is what I told you earlier, and I'm just reiterating it here, that the purpose of any urban renewal plan has to be, 1, to eliminate and prevent the spread of blighting conditions, and 2, to implement the community priorities. Okay, so we've covered what those factors are, the details of how you pay for it, who does it, when it happens. That gets worked out after and only if the urban renewal plan you choose to adopt it, because through that then you will have resources available to pay for some of those improvements. We've identified some of the things that came in the plan, some of the specific actions that would likely you all would likely participate in, whether it's assisting with financing some of those physical improvements, actually making them yourselves or with the city, construction, whatever those things are that are appropriate in your role and that will accomplish those 2 major elements of the plan. We emphasize here, and I mentioned this earlier, that the way this plan is written, and I think the way good plans are written, is that you don't have these autonomous bodies, these standalones. You don't have the Urban Renewal Authority and City Council and Planning Commission. The way good plans like this get implemented in advance is that you all work together, playing to your strengths and different roles. So the authority is the plan's principal administrator. City Council, and this is whether council sits as the authority board or whether it's appointed, they provide oversight. They'll be making major decisions in terms of perhaps revenue sharing agreements, cooperative agreements, things like that. So there's a lot of back and forth, ideally. And then Planning Commission continues in its existing role, just really focusing on what needs to accomplish here and kind of maintaining that high threshold. In terms of together, some of the things that'll happen, we've listed those there. If and when the plan gets adopted, there's a prioritization, identification of investment that can happen as dollars are available. What things will provide a public benefit? What do you want to encourage in the area? What kind of different kinds of money could come through this, so that you can kind of double up and get stretch those dollars, leverage those dollars, and ultimately promote private investment and job creation. The one thing I wanted to highlight here, a number of years ago, and this might be too much detail for people that don't kind of eat and sleep and breathe urban renewal, which sounds pretty exciting, right? But a number of years ago, the whole issue of project, what's an urban renewal project, came up. And I think it is important, though, some time was spent trying to define that. And I think it's important, I just wanted to mention it here, and hopefully over the years some people will keep reminding themselves, but when we say project, they tend to think of a development project. But truly, an urban renewal project can be as much as, supporting, verbally or politically or whatever, supporting a project that is advancing the goals of the community. It can be participating in public construction. It can be assisting a private investor, or it can be just using its authorities and powers to make sure that the plan goes forward and that it's implementing the priorities of the community. So I think that's why we all stepped back and said, all of these things are projects. And then the last thing, I mentioned the kind of the two aspects, curing blight or mitigating blight, and then the second one, advancing the goals of the community. What we wanted to do was remind you here, this is how you see that area in your comprehensive plan, in your future land use plan. You talk about it as a mixed use center with commercial and residential. You've identified this as one of only a handful of secondary commercial centers that have region serving retail uses. So, you've defined this area this way. And then in terms of this consistency with the plan, we try and say, okay, what are your goals and objectives? And what if this redevelopment happened? What if this property was allowed to perform better than it is? Which of your goals would it accomplish? So some of the ones we've highlighted here, your goal to promote long-term sustainable diverse economic development, regional tourism, retail commercial center growth, and directing development, or maybe we even say directing investment where it needs to happen. And then the last slide, just along that same line in terms of consistency with the comp plan, and we put it here because this is where we wanted to make sure you knew what was shared with us by Planning Commission. The top vision statement is the one that appears in your comprehensive plan. The lower one is one that one specific commissioner said, I'd really like to see us beef up the vision statement. Well, I don't know if that requires a whole amendment to the comp plan, you know, God forbid, but this might be a good step to kind of memorialize it within an urban renewal plan. That doesn't make it inconsistent. So this is what they proposed and what we wanted to share with you. And I've bolded the elements that they specifically wanted to kind of make pop or make important or priority or stand out. They talked about protecting the established neighborhoods, and that probably makes sense because you're talking about retail uses, so you want to make sure that they're compatible with each other, that there's connections. Also, heightened level of commitment to safe and comprehensive transportation system. So it's not terribly different, but I think the idea was to make certain priorities really pop. Totally up to you guys whether you want to reflect that in the plan, or somewhere else, or acknowledge it in some way, but we just wanted to share that with you. And that's it.
Thank you. Is there any questions at this point by council? Go ahead, Rick.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I understand we're in the very early stages here of what all this might look like. And just from your experience, other communities that have taken over is a infelicitous choice of terms. Let me strike that.
That's a great word that you just used.
Communities who have engaged in urban renewal districts. You know, how does that typically sort of unfold? Is there a condemnation of existing property followed by an open call for redevelopment, which is one scenario? Is there other scenarios that, you know, are more likely than that? Can you just riff on that for a minute?
I shouldn't have said yeah, I should have said no. So I can tell you, at least in my experience, and you have two attorneys that have a ton of experience, we happen to have worked for, I think the last count was like 3/4 of the state's urban renewal authority. So that gives us just a really broad breadth of project types, community types, values, priorities, things like that. And I can tell you, in all of those projects, condemnation was not, I can't even remember if it even happened, was used, but it definitely was not that first step. It wasn't even a part of my projects. As it turns out. That's just the way it turns out. So I think that's an old perception. I think it was definitely relevant in the East Coast. Every state's different. At one point, I counted how many times there was condemnation, eminent domain was used in Colorado. And it got sticky because there's sometimes when it's looked on favorably, they ask for it because you get tax benefits. So it's like, okay, which ones didn't they want and which ones did they want? It was fractional. All of the ones that I can speak to, it really, this was, I kind of refer to it as setting the table, much like your economic development strategy. You're saying, we are setting the table to move forward, to be specific about different things. You know, what's our first step? What's our second step? What are long-term goals? What are short-term? How are we going to measure ourselves? Who's going to do it? How are we going to pay for it? This is putting in place a mechanism to begin that dialogue. Now, what's different here is that, and most of the ones we work on, it's really the private sector that will determine the timing, the speed, the magnitude of what happens. And I mean, that is absolutely relevant in this instance. You have a private property owner. I mean, we're not talking hundreds of properties here, and we're just not sure what every property owner wants to do, but the private sector is going to drive the speed and rate and volume of what happens in this area. You have set the table. They can't do anything. They've already shown you in the best market over the last how many years since, you know, post-Great Recession, when everybody else is succeeding. I mean, you have all the evidence you need that their hands are tied. They can't. All you're doing is setting the table. Now, what role you play going forward, they need to come to you and show that they need you to fill a certain role, and at that time you'll decide if it's appropriate. But you can't even have those discussions until you put the plan in place. So it is, to your point, it's very early.
So if I can just pull a scenario from the basket of naivety here and just say, what would be the difference? Right now, I understand the lease is a prohibitive factor in getting other tenants to come into the mall. What specifically would an urban renewal district have as an effect upon that legal document?
Well, you would be a couple of different ways. I could tell you one way that, and this isn't, if this gets put in the paper like this is what's going to happen, I'm going to be disappointed. But a scenario, if this was playing out somewhere, could be to have the financial resources that come through an urban renewal authority. Again, let's say it played out that they couldn't get past this lease. Maybe they redevelop the rest of the mall, right? Maybe they lop it off and redevelop the site, and that continues exactly as it is, but they now have resources to redevelop the property, perhaps in a way similar to what you've described in your comprehensive plan. More intense, different amount of uses. Right now, not only are the hands tied, there's no revenue to do that. So putting that mechanism in place could allow for that. Another version of that might be that you have another set of people at the table to facilitate more reasonable terms that haven't been happening between the two parties. So whatever your role might be in that, that's another one. So it's pretty broad, and again, as yet to be defined. And Paul, did you want to weigh in on that one?
Maybe I can help a little bit. My name's Paul Benedetti, and I've been retained by the city to help with this process, getting the board organized. And then if you do that, then perhaps considering this plan that Ann just described. To answer your question about eminent domain, very, very seldom used. In the last few years, I can think of, and it's mostly come up in this situation that we're talking about here, where you have some kind of lease restriction or restrictive easement agreements that are out of date. Sometimes you have covenants that people put on land many years ago, and there's no way to get it off except perhaps by using eminent domain. And you're not actually acquiring a piece of property, not acquiring the entire title. You're just acquiring these elements of title, like the restrictive lease. There's nothing actually that anybody's going to own. It's just going to remove the restriction. There was a case in Lakewood that happened, a case in Longmont just recently, and then there was another case in Broomfield a few years ago where there was a multiplicity of owners owned the mall and they couldn't agree on anything. So the solution was it was a deteriorated mall similar to this, and they decided, let's transfer our dispute to money. So they all agreed to a condemnation case, and then they divided up the money, and the mall was redeveloped similar to what this plan would envision if you decide to go that way.
So if we are doing this, this is actually a tool to free up sort of an onerous contract.
Yes. That's part of it, and then perhaps some of these other improvements that perhaps the city needs out in the rights of way, and hopefully some nice redevelopment. You're going to be in charge if you do this. You're going to be the board, and you're going to be in charge of deciding how the project proceeds.
You know, one of the dilemmas in the retail world right now is that there isn't exactly a long queue of prospective retailers that want to get into an indoor mall, or maybe any mall for that matter. And as the world has changed and people don't go to malls so much, you know, we see a lot of zombie malls throughout the United States. And so is there a possibility, and I don't mean to get too far ahead of myself, and this probably isn't a question for you, but that facility itself undergoing urban renewal won't look anything like it looks now? And that would have to be a private sector move, you know, because the city is not going to put money into, you know, such an acquisition. But just given the times that we're in, I mean, I agree that something needs to happen at the West Glenwood Mall. You know, there's no doubt about that. But I just don't know if we want to be kidding ourselves and in a position of saying that, you know, we can resurrect something that isn't resurrectable given what's happening in the national retail landscape.
Well, you're right, and one thing I found out, even though I'm an attorney, I practice as a planner all the time, because every man's a planner, every person's a planner, I'm sorry. I'll never hear the end of that. Anyway, there are a lot of cities that are doing exactly what you're saying, and they have this mechanism, the Urban Renewal Authority, to help bring that about, because a lot of these projects, they're sort of the white elephants, and I borrowed that term from Carolyn White, who's here, who the other attorney. When she was explaining this process, the Urban Renewal Authority is a great device for helping you with these white elephant areas of your city that maybe need some public investment. And I like the idea that you're not really calling this a subsidy necessarily, and you are helping the private sector solve a problem. But that's actually a directive in the statute. The statute says, and you'll notice in the resolution, the second resolution, that the plan will afford maximum opportunity for the redevelopment of the area by private enterprise, because that's a directive right in the statute. So it's really a public-private partnership. And if things change, economic factors change, parts of the community get obsolete, sometimes you want to preserve those as historical areas and repurpose them. Sometimes you have really bad places and you start over again, do demolition and clearance. Or you have industrial parks, business parks, a lot of those these days the Urban Renewal Authority is doing. You have the Vestas project in Brighton and one in Pueblo. We have the business park that's over in Montrose that they're working on. And I'm working on 2 or 3 of those with a few other communities now. So it's a very versatile tool.
So just one last question and I'll stand down. This contract that is out there, does that ever have an expiration date, or was it written forever and a day?
If memory serves, that relates to the 30 years, because there were a number of option periods. I think what we put in the plan, and I looked at the number before I came up, and it was just about 30 years, if not 30 years.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that there are other things that are in play for the mall property. The zoning is PUD, and the PUD does restrict the uses that can be on the property. So there potentially someday, if there wanted to be a redevelopment that included other uses that are not currently permitted in the PUD, there would have to be another land use action, a PUD amendment to make those changes regarding the uses.
So when we started talking about this, and I don't mean to monopolize here, I'll stand down. Just one last question. The boundaries that we're looking at are essentially the mall boundaries, save the buildings that are, you know, in the south and right along the highway there. Is there any discussion about any of the other places like north of the mall, you know, or east or west? You know, has that discussion occurred? And if it's no, does that mean that this would be the boundary, or at some point that we might be able to expand that boundary?
So the boundary can be expanded. We did initially talk about there are other properties in the area that that might want to be redeveloped. We were working with this willing property owner on this project, but it could be that we expand at some point in the future the Urban Renewal Authority boundary. We would go through this exact same process. It's a major amendment and would require all the same noticing, would require all of the same work that we've just done, a condition survey, all of those sorts of things. And it's certainly possible in the future. Regarding the land that's to the north, the vacant land, that is in the county and would not be, until such time it was annexed, eligible to be within this Urban Renewal Authority. Correct me if I'm wrong.
One of the findings you're required to make by the statute is to keep the area small as possible to accomplish your planning purposes. Because it's so complex, it's a complex process to adopt a plan these days. My recommendation is you can have large or small urban renewal areas anywhere in the community. That's the area of operation. So if you want to do other redevelopment in adjacent areas, I'd recommend maybe a separate plan for that area, or you can amend this one. It just gets a little complicated when you start using tax increment financing, and we don't have to get into that level of detail tonight, but there's a good reason for why maybe you want to have smaller areas. They can all work together. It can be part of an integrated overall plan. Your comp plan is the best way to do it, or a neighborhood plan to implement land use. But this is a great way to help finance public investment.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Shelley?
I have some questions. I guess I'm not sure who might be best to answer them, possibly Paul, but I will not pretend that this is any area of expertise of mine, but I have been doing some read up and research on the CML site and others about urban renewal authorities, and it does appear to be a good tool that we can use to help the community, you know, by partnering on the property and in the authority, that we can reach some of our goals that we do envision in our comprehensive plan. And you know, one that is dear to me would be to see the mixed-use development out there and see it as an opportunity to gain workforce housing, you know, going forward. But I have some questions on how it actually works in reality. So I don't know that the owner is here tonight, the owner of the property, but I assume that we work closely with the owner in making these plans.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You will have, and this comes later, if you adopt the plan, then usually it's a contract between the authority and the owner about what the owner is going to do. And, you know, there'll be a list of things that the owner has to do to comply with the plan. There's also, in this plan, there's no property tax increment financing. It's only sales tax. So only the city portion of the increase in sales tax would be used to help finance the public purpose parts of this project. So
okay, so we don't have an option to add a TIF if we want to.
Well, you can if you want to amend it, but when you form the authority now, you're going to have your three partners on here. You're going to have somebody that the city, or I'm sorry, the county commissioners appoint.
Right.
You're going to
School
have a
district.
member of the school board.
Right.
And you're going to have one member that represents, and I don't know how you're going to do this here, all your special districts.
Right.
I don't know if you're going to do it community-wide or just the ones that levy in this area. But you're not going to be asking them at this point, as I understand it, to contribute any of their property tax increment. The increase,
sales tax.
it's just going to be the municipal sales tax, and that will be an agreement between the city council and the Urban Renewal Authority, which is the city council and these 3 other members wearing different hats. So be contracting to help finance the project, and then there'll be a contract between the Urban Renewal Authority and the developer or the owner of this property in this case.
Okay.
And then there'll be in some way maybe negotiations then with the lessor of this property by the authority. You'll be in charge of that to try to see if there's a way to resolve this without having to resort to eminent domain, which is the tool nobody wants to use. And it's not used very much. It's only, I think in the last 10 years, I only know of one case that's actually gone to actual fulfillment where there's been an award and an actual hearing, and commissioners made findings about how much the property was damaged. A very similar thing. It was one retailer that controlled the entire redevelopment of the mall. Yeah,
right.
And there was another one a few years earlier than that down in Lakewood too. Same situation. It was the only way the community could get this property back into some kind of productive use, rather than just sitting there, not being able to repurpose it because it was just a bunch of empty buildings.
Right. So I see a good value in the Urban Renewal Authority and the partnership that the city can play in that, and benefits to the city and to the community. What is the city signing on to as far as obligations? Do we have timeline obligations? Do we have other financial or legal obligations that may not be apparent on the surface here?
Not unless you want to. I mean, the project supposedly finances itself, because if this restriction is removed, then you'll have new sales tax producing uses. The portion of the sales tax that is an increase over the base value, which is what's there now, what can be used in whole or in part to help finance the redevelopment. So that's the extent of the obligation. If that fund isn't enough to finance the obligation, you don't have to come out of pocket for it. The city doesn't. Okay. This is entirely an obligation of the Urban Renewal Authority, but it's not a general obligation. It's a revenue obligation. No revenue, no payment. Okay. So everybody takes a chance, and it's just like a revenue bond that the city might do under an enterprise. But in this case, it's the Urban Renewal Authority, and it's an independent corporate body, like similar to a housing authority, similar to the DDA, except even the DDA is more of a government than the Urban Renewal Authority.
So the city's not taking on a risk for obligation to?
No.
And no obligation on specific timeline or?
No, otherwise everything just stays the same out there. I mean, you're just helping prime the pump and get things going.
Great. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Ann or Paul? Or
I was thinking you could use it to buy that front loader that you saw that picture of.
There we go.
All right, thank you very much. We'll open it up to the public at this point. Is there anyone in the public who would like to comment on this resolution regarding the I won't read the whole resolution. It's essentially the finding that one or more blighted areas exist in the city of Glenwood. Okay.
Is there somebody else that want to go ahead of us? Speak up.
But I don't think so, but we can wait a minute or two if, okay.
Since I escaped getting called on earlier during the formal presentation, I'll speak during public comment. Mayor, Council, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Carolyn White. I'm counsel for the owner of the mall, Glenwood Springs Mall LLLP. And maybe to answer a couple of questions that came up earlier, I want to make sure that you know for the record that the property owner is supportive of this action that's before you tonight and would urge you to approve the formation of the new Urban Renewal Authority and the Urban Renewal Plan. And I think the other thing that I want to say on behalf of the property owner, maybe in response to that most recent line of questioning, is that certainly the way we view this action is if you choose to proceed tonight, you're acquiring the toolbox. But whether you want to use those tools and how you want to use them are all decisions for you to be made at a later date, and it is incumbent on the property owner to submit a proposal to the newly formed Urban Renewal Authority and propose to you what it is that they would like to do in furtherance of the plan that you've adopted, and request your support in one of the various ways that you will now have authorized, and then you will decide at that time whether to do it, which tools to use, and how to use them, and what role you want to play. So all that is to be decided. This is just, do you want to have the toolbox available to you? And as the property owner, we are asking you to adopt this plan so that you will have the toolbox, because we think that with the tools together, we will be better able to accomplish the goals that everyone has to see this mall return to a higher degree of vibrancy in the community. Happy to answer any questions that just are the main points I wanted to make.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Rick?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So as the attorney for the owner of the mall, has it ever come to you that you might consider taking that contract to court and getting a favorable judgment, and so that we wouldn't be needing an Urban Renewal Authority to bring that about? And I know that's a loaded question, but I'm just curious, what the thinking is. So
I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to answer it for a couple of reasons. One, I'm not that kind of attorney. I'm an urban renewal attorney, and I am not the main person that has been handling the lease negotiations. But even if I were, the legal advice that I might give my client about how best to address this problem would not be something I would be able to discuss in a public meeting.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
I hope you understand.
I do.
All right. Any other questions? All right.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Hey, is there any other public comment, sir? Oh.
Yeah, I'm Rob Anderson, 1405 Donegan Road, and this is kind of an interesting situation. I've just got a couple questions. What if the city doesn't take this on? What happens to the mall?
My guess is, and this is pure speculation, is it would sit there and languish in its current state.
With Ross out there, who is a big multinational corporation, do you think they're going to make the mall maintain and stay open because they have to do business out there given their contract?
I got to say, these are really not questions for us. We don't know what Ross is going to do or not do, or I don't want to not answer your question, but we wouldn't have any idea what Ross's plans are or not.
Well, I'm just saying from a business point of view, if it's a lease, I've owned a building, and I don't know what would happen if I told the main lessor or lessee that I was going to close my building down. Like, it's just a curious thing I'm curious about.
Well, in this situation, that one main lessee is keeping the other 90% of the mall from being leased. So if I was that property owner, I would consider that it might be good to get rid of that one lessee. I'm just saying that seems to be the situation we're sitting in right now.
Yes. Mr. Mayor, I guess I'd be really careful about speculating about some private interests. The request here is for Urban Renewal Authority. I don't know that there's any way we can answer those questions. I don't know if the owner's attorney is willing or can, but I think that's really who's the appropriate person to, if anybody, to answer those questions, maybe after the close of public comment.
Okay.
Okay, there's more, but maybe at another time.
Thank you, Rob.
Sir?
Hi, guys. My name is Randy De Herrera, and this is my wife, BJ. We own Goofball's Party Store, which is, we're a tenant of the mall. We opened up 2015, December 2015, so we've been there about 3 years. First year was great. Since we've been there, 9 tenants have moved out, and not one has been replaced. So we've seen a major sales decline, about 30%, which is really, really affecting our, our finances. So we have considered relocating to Grand Junction, of course, doing what we can to keep our business going. We don't want to. We want to stay in Glenwood. We live in Newcastle, so it's really affecting us that one tenant can control that, have that much control over the mall. Because tenants have been, and this is hearsay, but tenants have been wanting to come into the mall, but they can't because Ross won't allow them. Now, if you've ever been down to the Mesa Mall, it's flourishing. There's people down there. I was down there 2 weeks ago, and it was packed. So people still shop at the mall. People still like to experience shopping. Granted, a lot of people buy online. That's going to continue. But there are still a lot of people that want to continue or use shopping malls. So we're here tonight to ask you to go ahead and approve this because, we're 3 stores. There's 3. There's Payless, GNC, and our store on the west side. The DMV is moving outside to the end. So that foot traffic is gone. And that's our main foot traffic right now. So please take this into consideration for us little small business owners that really rely on that foot traffic.
So I have done a lot of research on the urban renewal program, and I've done my research. I've reached out to people because they're like, what is this program? What does that mean for our business? So I've done a lot of my legwork, and we do support it. And so talking to the locals in the community, I've asked them, what would they like to see out there? What would you love to see? Because that area could be awesome. It could be phenomenal. So people are like, bring back the movie theater. Get some kind of entertainment for the locals. Bring the locals back into Glenwood Springs. Spend their money. So get the movie theater. I've heard Trader Joe's. I've heard Kohl's. I've heard on top possibly some affordable housing, some smaller units. It could be great out there. So we strongly encourage. Go on Facebook. Ask people what they want to see. But entertainment, something for the kids to do out there. We need, and then tourists come up here, they might want to go to a movie. So that helps the tourist industry as well. So bring the local business and the tourists more together. So we strongly, strongly encourage you guys to go ahead and approve this, please. Thank you for your time.
The bottom line is
thank you.
One tenant controlling the whole mall and deciding who goes in there, which is ridiculous. So thank you for your time, and have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, is there anyone else who would like to comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I will close it to public comment, bring it back to council for discussion and/or motion.
Mike, can I ask a question? I guess for Deborah and or Carl. We have, I think what we have is 2 motions, one related to each resolution.
Yeah, we need, first a motion on 2018-60.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we're this one first, 2018-60.
Right.
Okay, are you ready?
Sure.
Well, yeah, go ahead, I'll make a comment.
I would move to approve resolution 2018-60. Do I need to read that whole paragraph?
That's fine. I mean, I guess I prefer you to just
Okay, move to approve resolution 2018-60, a finding that one or more blighted areas exist in the city of Glenwood Springs, the need for redevelopment and rehabilitation of such areas in accordance with the Colorado Urban Renewal Law, declaring it to be in the public interest that Glenwood Springs Urban Renewal Authority exercise the powers provided by law and designating, sorry, it's getting late, the city council and representatives of affected taxing bodies of the Urban Renewal Authority.
I second the motion.
There's a motion by Todd and a second by Shelley to approve resolution 2018-60. Further discussion? Go ahead, Rick.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, you know, I believe that we probably ought to do this. I just question the remedy here for a bad business decision. I'm going to vote for it. I wish that there would have been a modicum of common sense back whenever this contract was signed. Because, you know, you may not believe this, but I don't necessarily believe the government has the solution for everything. So
I don't believe that.
You don't believe that?
I'm kidding.
Thank you.
I'm just kidding.
All right, any further discussion? Let's go ahead and call the question.
Oh, where's there? There it is.
Okay, now I would entertain a motion. We don't have to reopen public comment, do we, on the second resolution? I would entertain a motion on resolution 2016 dash.
Do we have to see how that first one came out?
Oh, whoops, I guess we do.
I don't have the second one. Oh, here it is. Or no.
Okay, I would now entertain a motion on resolution 2018-61.
You guys are gonna have to cover that. I'm not finding my 61, so.
Okay, I'll make a motion and move the council adopt resolution 2018-61, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, making certain legislative findings and approving the West Glenwood Springs Urban Renewal Authority Plan.
Second.
We have a motion by Jim and a second by Todd to approve resolution 2018-61. Any further discussion on this item? Let's go ahead and call the question. Thank you. Oops. Not pre-counting the votes, I just... Okay, now thank you. All right. Moving on, report from the city administration. City manager?
I just wanted to thank you, Mike, for all the hard work that you put into the Build America grant. We could not have done it without us. You were an integral partner, and we appreciate what you did so much.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that, and I think the reverse is true as well. It was a team effort. So
I think we should all get Build America hats then, you know, just kind of go along with the theme.
Not red, please.
red hats that say Build America.
I'm not tired of winning yet. Okay.
And thank you, and Carl. I mean, it's just, that's such a huge win for Glenwood Springs. I mean, so.
Yeah, great job on that. Mm-hmm.
Carl, do you have anything?
I really don't, other than it hasn't been a bad day.
Right.
It hasn't been a bad day,
You know, wasn't exactly what I expected. I usually have a little more trepidation going into these days. So, it was a good thing. Anyway, and I just want to totally thank Ann out of my office that sat down and did some training with you. I hope that was helpful to you guys. And so, there again, like I said, from a leadership standpoint, I genuinely appreciate you guys doing that.
Yep.
It's always good to remind yourself, just to hear it.
Yeah.
All right. Does anyone have any board, committee, or commission meeting hearing that you're just dying to inform us of, or can we delay that to
You want me to answer for everybody?
for another 4 months, 12 days, and how many hours? All right, we'll move on. So we have an executive session on the agenda to conduct a conference with the city manager and city attorney
Oh, see if
Thank
see
you.
if Davis will raise his hand. I don't think I can even see that little
Okay.
equipment right at this moment.
To discuss the following: Garfield Industrial Development, Shoshone permanency discussions, and the recreational in-channel diversion water right.
I don't think I can see that right now. My eyes are so bright.
I,
See you,
Steve
Christian.
Davis,
Thank
need
you,
to go
Mr.
into
Public.
executive session for the purpose of conducting a conference with the city manager and city attorney to discuss the city's purchase acquisition lease